Thank you all for being here. Thank you all so much for being here. We got a lot to get through, so I want to make this top bit as brief as possible. My name is Amir Talai. I'm a SAG-AFTRA member. I serve on the local board in LA. I've been a part of these You Are the Union Zooms since the beginning of the pandemic, and basically they're a chance for members to connect with member leaders, get questions answered, and be better informed. Um, wow, this is such a great turnout. I'm just so delighted. So look, we call these things You Are the Union because we want to sort of bridge the gap a little bit, right? The union is not a corporation or an employer, it's you, right? And if you want to have an impact on how it operates, you can. Now, to be clear, although I am a board member and other board members might be available to answer questions at various points on this Zoom, no one on this Zoom is speaking like for the union in an official capacity, right? I wish that our union had the resources to do this kind of thing sort of all the time and through official channels, and we can sometimes, but because the union's income has been reduced a little bit in the last year, some of us are just taking the initiative to do things like this in an unofficial way, right? So before we go any further, a few acknowledgements. I'm in Los Angeles, and so I want to acknowledge that Los Angeles is on the traditional territory of the Chumash and Tongva tribes. I think it's important to know that. I want to acknowledge that the President of the United States was impeached today, and no matter how you feel about that, I think that it's clear the events of the last week are still sort of casting a pall over our entire country. I want to acknowledge that the majority of us are very much hanging by a thread, emotionally, financially, sometimes physically. The pandemic kind of confounds description. While the majority of the people in this Zoom are going to be concerned about our industry with respect to film and TV and commercials, I do want to acknowledge those SAG-AFTRA members who are more in harm's way than ever. And that's broadcasters and journalists. These are folks who are not only impacted by the virus, but by increased threats and violence from the far right all around the country, which is just terrifying. So y'all know why we're here, to talk about our industry at this sort of unique inflection point in the pandemic. I know a lot of you have questions. I received a lot of questions via email this week. If you have any more questions, put them in the chat. Put them in the chat as soon as possible. If you want to be on video, let us know, and you can ask your question live if you're on Zoom. So what we'll do with your questions is this. If they're straightforward and I happen to know the answer, I will answer. If I need to invite someone else who's on the Zoom to answer, I'll do that, and they'll start their video. We've got other member leaders on. We've got folks with recent onset experience as actors, as broadcasters, as stunt people, as stand-ins, as background. We've got agents on here. We've got a COVID compliance officer on here. Maybe you don't even know what the heck that is yet. And then later on, we're going to have an ER doctor. So any kind of question that has to do with our work right now, go ahead and ask it, okay? I also want to be transparent about a couple important things. We are recording this in case any of our guests or I say something brilliant somehow that we want to clip and send to people later. But we will not be putting any of your names, any of your faces in those clips, all right? Also, I had a reporter reach out and ask if he could observe this. And I wasn't sure how to answer, because on the one hand, I feel like I want people to feel comfortable saying whatever they want on here. But on the other hand, I think what is going on in union members' minds is newsworthy. And I also think it's newsworthy that members are getting together and helping each other with information. So the agreement that I made with this reporter is that he can be here for the first half until 7:30. And if he quotes anyone but me, he won't use their name. I hope that's okay. I apologize if it's not. But again, if you want to say or ask something anonymously, put it in the Zoom chat. No one's going to see it but me and Kevin Ashworth, who is helping run this tonight, okay? So that's about it. I want to see how we're doing on questions. Don't need that. Let me click around. Okay, so already have a couple questions being put in the chat. Fantastic. But I'm going to start with some of the questions I got over the course of the week. I got a question about being a backup on a commercial, and I wasn't able to talk to anybody who was a backup on a commercial. I know Katie Von Till's on the Zoom, so perhaps Katie Von Till can talk about that a little bit later. But if anyone has any more insight, feel free to let me know in the chat. Are VO studios safe? That's another question I got. Yes, they are. The union has specific protocols, and hundreds of VO studios around the country have sort of certified that they're following the SAG-AFTRA protocols. So if you book a voiceover job, go ahead and put that and go to this link that I'm giving everyone right now. I'm putting this in the chat on Zoom, and you can click that and see if that studio has passed the protocols. You can also just ask your agent who books you on that job, have they passed the protocols? And the overwhelming majority of the time, they will have. All right. Question, in the future, will it be required to show that you've had both of your COVID-19 vaccinations before you start work? So that's a great question that doesn't have an answer yet. Those conversations are absolutely going to be had between our union and other unions and our employers. But I will say this, will it be required? Don't have an answer yet. Can it be required? Legally, yes. According to some federal guidance that was put out in mid-December, employers may fire or refuse to hire people who don't get vaccinated. I was just reading up on that today. Not on the SAG-AFTRA website, just did a Google search. But yeah, this is sort of a workplace safety issue, right? If you're exposing your employees to COVID, then perhaps you could be held liable. So some companies may want to require that. And for some companies, it might just be not just a workplace safety thing, but just a commerce thing, right? If an airline wants, it can appeal to customers by saying, everyone on our planes will have been vaccinated. Passengers, flight attendants, pilots, everyone. So if they want, they can do that. Now, again, SAG-AFTRA has not put out any specific guidance on this yet, but certainly that conversation is going to happen. Another question that I got over email. Do I get paid for COVID tests? Yes, you do. For film and TV, if you have to come in before your workday, right? So if you start shooting on Monday and they have you come in the Thursday prior for a COVID test, you get paid $250 for each COVID test day. And that's not commissionable, by the way. For commercials, it's paid the same as a fitting. So I think it's about $89 per hour, right? So yeah, so you do get paid for COVID tests. So this is a question that I got a lot. And it's basically two questions that are sort of mirror images of each other. I want to work, am I allowed to? Or I booked something, but I don't want to work. Am I required to, right? I've had actors tell me, I will be furious if they shut production down. I am desperate right now. And I've had other actors tell me, I am furious that they haven't shut production down. There's no ICU beds. So a little bit of background on this. Over the summer, SAG-AFTRA collaborated on a literal once in a generation set of guidelines together with other unions and studios and networks. And basically the idea was, well, we can't make anything in the world 100% safe, but let's make it as safe as possible. So they put out these guidelines. And then in the fall, production slowly opened up. Fast forward to December, poor decisions by federal and state and local leaders and by reckless individuals led to a post-holiday COVID surge. And LA is arguably the hottest hotspot in the country right now. There's no available ICU beds, or it's very close to 100%. So at the end of 2020, the LA Health Department urged TV and film to shut down, but it didn't order film and TV to shut down. And then about a week after that, SAG-AFTRA, the Producers Guild, and commercial producers jointly encouraged commercial production to shut down in LA until ICU beds become available. So you'll notice none of those entities have required a shutdown. That's because in a climate where people are going hungry and homeless, none of those entities felt comfortable telling people not to work. If our state and federal government had a sort of more fulsome response to the pandemic and we're actually paying people to stay home, that might be different. But obviously, in a lot of ways, our local and state and federal governments have failed us. So what the union's done is get together with other industry stakeholders, epidemiologists, other experts, and then recommending people in certain places not work, but laying out stringent guidelines if they do work. I feel like that is acknowledging the moment that we're in and trying not to make it worse. There's no perfect solution, and it's debatable if this is the best one, but I think it's an extremely good one, right? So for the people who want to work, yes, audition for union work, accept union work. To the people who don't want to, don't audition. Hold your horses, talk to your agent and book out. If you have booked work, but no longer feel comfortable doing it, that's more complicated, right? But every person I've spoken with has told me that it's possible to get out of work that you've been booked to do, right? Co-stars to series regs are getting out of coming to set. It's complicated, but the way you have to do it is to communicate. Talk to your agent. If you don't have one, talk to whoever cast you. And in a little bit, we're going to have at least one agent on the Zoom who may speak to that. If you want to let me know in the Zoom, I'm an agent and I can speak to that. That'd be great. But look, the fact is, everyone up and down the line understands this situation is unprecedented. So look, it's natural for you to be fearful that you're not going to be empathized with. But I promise you, it's much more likely that you will be. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I answered this question. Okay, great. Katie Von Till, I'm going to start your video if you don't mind. I have a couple questions that have come through that I think you are very well suited to answer. So let me go through and ask to unmute. And then, where is she? There she is. And then, can you start your video, KVT?
Nope.
Yeah. Kevin, can you ask KVT to start her video? Like, just click on more and have her start her video. For some reason, I don't have the ability to do that. All right, we just made KVT a co-host. That'll work.
Oh,
I didn't know how else to do it.
Hi.
There she is.
Hi.
All right. Hi, KVT. Thanks so much for being here. KVT is a very good friend of mine as well. She is the chair of the National Commercial Performers Committee, and so knows plenty about commercials. You've also shot some TV during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, and I've produced during the pandemic.
Boom. Glad you're here. Okay. So someone says, is it true that commercial shoots have no COVID precautions in place, such as testing, social distancing, etc.? Well, I know the answer is no, but can you be a little more clear? Because I think when the Safe Way Forward came out this summer, it was specifically about film and TV. It didn't mention commercials. Now I know a lot of people have done commercials and have done them safely. So can you get a little more granular with that, please?
Sure, absolutely. The first thing I want to point out that sometimes when we're going through all this, people just it escapes their minds. But our employers and commercials are different. We are employed by, for the most part, advertising agencies, most of whom are members of what's called the JPC, the Joint Policy Committee. And so it's a completely different set of employers than the people who hire us for television and film. We have had discussions with them from day one and have had some protocol in place. However, when you're shooting a commercial, the majority of people on set are actually not hired by the people who hire us. The majority of people on set are the crew members, directors, and they're usually hired by the producers who do not hire us. I know that's confusing because we are hired by producers and crew is hired by producers for television and film. But commercials, it's totally different. It's a different set of employers. And we wanted to make sure that our sister unions, IATSE, the DGA, who are the larger set of employees on commercial shoots, were able to get their agreement in place first, because it wouldn't have made any sense to get testing for actors, but not get testing for the crew. And of course, the crew is not the jurisdiction of our employers. It's totally different employers. So it's a little bit of a puzzle, so to speak. Of course, you may have read in the trades that the DGA IATSE did make an agreement with the AICP for protocol. Now that that has happened, our talks continue and we should have an agreement published soon. However, I want everybody to know that from the get-go, all the commercials that have been produced during the pandemic have been individually cleared by staff. So they've gone through all of their COVID protocol with staff. Staff has said, no, that's not good enough, or yes, this is okay, to get approval to actually have the production go forward. And at this point, we're well over, I think it's over 1,500 productions now that have been individually cleared by commercial staff with their various protocol. And the protocol may change a little bit depending on, there are things that have been shot in people's homes. So that protocol is a little bit different where nobody is actually entering your home, or maybe a few people are entering your home. Some things have been shot outside. Some things you're with your actual partner whom you live with that you're shooting the commercial, rather than someone you've not met or spend time with. It's somebody who is in your pod, so to speak. So that might account for some of the variations in protocol with different shoots.
So I just want to sort of reiterate something to make sure that I understand what you're saying, and maybe repeat it for other people. Even though we haven't had, even though our union hasn't released a specific set of guidelines similar to the ones for film and TV for commercials, every commercial that has been approved by the union has only been approved because y'all talked through their protocols. Is that right?
That is correct. And there is agreed upon protocol, actually. It's just not published because we didn't want to undermine the other talks going on, right? So we want to make sure that they had their chance to get their talks with their employers so that we could get then ours solidified with our employers who are different. I want to mention one other thing about the recommendation of the JPC and the producers and SAG-AFTRA to not shoot right now commercials. And personally, as a member of the CPC, and the chair, and the vice chair of the CCSC, I know of several productions that have postponed their productions by a few weeks. Some have postponed them indefinitely, waiting for things to clear. It just depends on what kind of timing they're dealing with regarding their media buys. But the other thing I wanted to say is the reason why it was a suggestion is that the union actually doesn't have the legal authority to shut down production. That has to come from the government. We don't have the legal authority to do that. So I just want to be really sure people say, why hasn't the union shut it down? The union actually cannot. And I know that like labor law is confusing and all that stuff, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but that's the deal. So It's
That's
hard.
a really important
Oh,
point of clarification.
yeah, it's really important. We couldn't shut it down if we wanted to. And like you said, there are some people who want to and some people who don't. It sure would be great if that decision were taken out of the hands of individual people so that we could keep ourselves safe and if, we could get some money to stay home. But that's not the case. So I just want people to know that's why the union hasn't shut it down, because the union cannot.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you talk about backups on commercials and how that works?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so everybody knows about this thing called the avail, right? The avail isn't a real thing, right? It's just this sort of informal thing that has come up in our industry. There's nothing in our contract about avail. People say we need to bring up avails, but it's not a real thing. If we say, well, we're going to put avails in the contract, then they'll just change the word to pin, as we hear in TV and film. They'll change it to Velcro. They'll change it to snap. I don't know, button. So there's kind of no real point of doing that. But a hold is different. A hold is in our contract. So if you have been asked to hold days, if you are a backup who has been asked to hold days, you are to be paid your session fees for those days that you are holding. If you have any questions or concerns about that, I absolutely make sure you reach out to staff. Many agents are solid on our contract, know how it works, know that you're supposed to be paid for those things. But some agents may not be quite so versed in it. So just make sure that you're getting all the support that you can from your agent. And if you are not, just go ahead and call staff. I also recommend when you call the union, if you can, I know the call center is great and all that, but I actually like to go to the contact list on the SAG-AFTRA website and look up the specific department that I'm calling and call them directly. That's just my own personal thing. So call the commercials department. My favorite person to speak to there right now is Claudette. Give her a ring and make sure that you're getting paid. But yes, if you are on hold, you are getting paid your session fees for those days.
And so what'll happen, and why are they doing this backup thing? Like,
right. So the idea being that if somebody tests positive for COVID, they don't want them obviously showing up on set. So somebody, and I know just recently of a story of someone who is the backup and then was subsequently hired because the person who was originally hired did test positive.
Wow. So as a backup, you would get paid a daily session, but then obviously
for every day that you're held.
Right.
Correct.
Every day. Okay. Okay, great. Real quick, this just came in. Is backup pay commissionable?
Yeah, it's wages like anything else. So it's your session fee and it is commissionable, yes.
Yeah, and well, you'll get pension and health on that too, right?
Sure thing.
Boom. Okay, I don't see any questions right at this moment that
I can answer.
That would be perfect for you. So I'm gonna have you step off for a moment, but I'm so glad that you're still here.
By the way, I'm here till 7:15. So if anybody has any, but I'm available via text. I just have to go to my acting class because Can't Stop, Won't Stop. But if there is something, I will be available by text. So if there's a commercial question you need me to answer, just let me know and I'll pop back in.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much. Awesome. Okay. Right now, I want to bring on Paul Emmons. Paul, who I haven't met yet, works as a COVID compliance officer. And I think that'd be really useful for people to let me see. Boy, I could have sworn that this went differently, but Kevin, could you make Paul Emmons a co-host so that he can share his video? Great. Paul, you there?
I am.
I hear you.
I am. And
now I see you. Hi, Paul. Very nice to meet you. So I know a lot of people are wondering about COVID compliance officers. So what is that?
What is a COVID compliance officer?
Yeah, what do you do?
Well, we were added back in, I don't know, April, May, something like that, in order to enforce the COVID compliance rules that were set up for the motion picture, film, television industry, that portion of it. So we get on set, we discuss with production what they're going to be doing and how to make sure that they are in compliance with DHS. Being in Los Angeles, every county has its own Department of Health. Department of Health is really what decided what the requirements are. And just for clarification, Department of Health is really the only agency that, one, has the ability to shut a production down because they're not complying with health rules, and they're the ones that decided what the health rules are. So, and in that, for LA, so in other words, every county is going to have their own rules, but they're going to be somewhat similar. LA counties was the sort of flagship. There's something that's called Appendix J in the LA County going back to work rules. And this was partly negotiated. I'm a member of Local 80. I'm a medic. I've been on-set medic for about a little over 30 years. And our local was instrumental in helping to negotiate with the state of California on the Safe Way Forward, and then later the white paper that allowed the California and Gavin Newsom's office to allow us to go back to work. And a great deal of that had to do with saying that we were going to comply with a very strict set of protocols, whereas in terms of testing, in terms of PPE, in terms of distancing, Tom Davis, who is our business agent, spent a lot of time in Sacramento getting these rules in place that allowed us to go back to work. And it is the degree to which we are as an industry complying with those rules and having a very low incident of outbreaks on set. We've had very few actual, what is called an outbreak, which means you have 3 or more people that test positive on the same production. We've had very, very few, if any, that I'm aware of that has happened. Individuals have tested positive, but an outbreak that was actually traced to the production itself is almost not happened. I may be wrong about it being 0, but it's very low.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that happening much either. So that's good to know that it's similar things.
Right, and that's why it's exceedingly important that we follow the rules that are requested. So the on page 2 of Appendix J, LA County DHS specifically spells out what a COVID compliancer is and what they do. They are really the on-set person that enforces the rules to make sure that they have PPE in place, that they have sanitizing stations, that people are tested on a schedule that is required based on what kind of production. And as Katie was talking about earlier, commercials were exempt from that. In fact, it says so in that document, because basically what they said was commercials are so short, it's not really practical to test people because you may only be in existence for a couple of days. Whereas film or television production, you're going to be weeks or months in production. So there had to be some kind of a schedule of testing. There is some confusion, which I just want to mention real briefly, about CCOs, COVID compliance officers, versus HSMs, or health safety managers, and HSS, health safety supervisor. Those terms were created inside of the second white paper that was put together by SAG, DGA, Producers Guild, IA, which is my union. They created those terms. It is in essence synonymous with COVID compliance officer. They're interchangeable in terms of terminology. So if you have a health safety supervisor on set, it is considered the same thing as a COVID compliance officer. COVID compliance officer is the only thing that was named in the LA County DHS Appendix J protocols.
Uh,
So
I'm gonna stop you for one quick second. I just learned of an issue that we're having with this right now. I didn't realize that I had a limit on the number of people allowed in this Zoom, and we've reached that limit. And I'd like as many people as possible to be able to watch this. So, folks, if you aren't planning on asking a question live on video, I've put a YouTube link in the chat. Would you do me a favor and hop off the Zoom and get on that YouTube instead? You can ask questions at that YouTube via chat, but you won't be able to appear on video. But yeah, I'm seeing that people are trying to get into the Zoom and they're not able to, which is a real shame. So this is great. Okay, I'm seeing some people drop off, so that's excellent. Hopefully these people are dropping off and going to YouTube. Thank you very much for your cooperation, everybody, and I apologize for interrupting you there, Paul. Great. Okay, I see some people. Oh, great. A good handful have switched over. Fantastic. So, Paul, let me ask you. You said that you are the person on set that enforces the protocols. Do you enforce those alone?
no, it depends on the size of the production. Most productions, all productions are required to also have a medic. On some very small productions and off production locations, such as a construction mill, rigging strikes, you might have a combination person that is both the medic and the CCO. Just because if you've only got a crew of 4 or 5 people, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to hire a whole COVID compliance crew when really it's about making sure one of the protocols is everybody's gets a temperature check on the way in. They answer a questionnaire that says whether or not they've been exposed to COVID. They have family members, so on and so forth. Those are sort of, and then they make sure they have their PPE going in, so they have masks, they have gloves, they're aware of what the protocols are. Then also the COVID officer will have a little spiel at the safety meeting to make sure everybody's aware of what the compliance requirements are. But generally on the larger productions, anything over 15, 20 people, we're part of a team. It's the health or safety team. So you would have the COVID compliance officer, you'd have the medic, you may have an HSM who is a coordinator, who's more like a production coordinator, making sure that we know who's on set, that whether or not they've been tested, whether or not they were required to be tested, what that circumstance is. And then you're going to have sometimes are known as COVID PAs, which are the people that are going around set all day saying 6 foot, meaning, stay 6 foot distance from each other.
Okay.
And put your mask back on. So those people are generally either the COVID officer or the medic or the your health safety PAs and assistants. And you may have a whole team. It really is up to production. That part, again, understand that it's all very new. We were kind of making it up. I started back in I think probably May. I was on one of the first commercials, and it was mostly commercials at the beginning that were shooting because they could gear up faster. It doesn't take much.
So I had a few actors ask me, what do I do if I'm on set and I see someone not following protocols, or at least, what I think is them not following protocols? Who should I speak with? And is there, and how do I know who is the person that I should speak with?
Well, you should know who the COVID compliance officer is. First and foremost, every production at all times, and most of us know this already, you should have a safety meeting in the morning. During that safety meeting, the COVID compliance officer is introduced to everyone. Now, obviously, not everybody can be, physically there for that meeting. Somebody's, in their trailer or, working somewhere else. But just ask production, say, who's our COVID officer? It is a requirement to have one. That is a DHS requirement. You cannot be on, you cannot have a production without a COVID compliance officer. otherwise maybe known as a health safety manager, but it's the same thing. There has to be one. They cannot get a film permit from Film LA without both having one and designated and named. It's part of the permit.
So, by the way, you've used the term DHS a couple times. That's Department of Health and Safety.
Yes.
And so if I come on to set in the middle of the day and I missed the safety meeting and I don't know who the COVID compliance officer is, I should ask like a PA or an AD to point out the COVID compliance officer. Is that what you're saying?
You can do that. Also, we generally set up a screening table right at the entrance to wherever we're shooting. So if we're on a stage, it'll be, right there at the elephant door. It might be at base camp. It might be at the crew parking. But there should be a place, because nobody's allowed to go on set until they've been had their temperature taken and a questionnaire done.
Okay.
And again, protocols are a little different, but temperatures are required. Everybody has to get their temperature taken. That person is part of the COVID team. You can ask them.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to go to some specific questions that I got from members. Go. Okay. Does the production company contact you if anyone on set or in production tests positive while you're working? Right. So let's say I've been contracted to work for a week. I shoot Monday. Tuesday, someone gets a test positive. Am I going to find out before I go to work Wednesday or Thursday?
When you say who are you referring to? Are you talking about some other crew member that gets notified that a different crew member tested positive, or are you talking about the person that tested positive themselves?
So someone else. So yes.
Not necessarily. There is, remember, or keep in mind that there is a privacy issue. Unless you have a reason to know the identity of someone who tested positive, you're not necessarily going to know that. You will be informed. There is a whole there's a concept called contact tracing. This is what happens when someone tests positive and it is attempted to determine who they came in contact with and might have infected. There is a set of protocols as it relates to on set that if you might have come in contact with the person who got tested, you will be notified. Generally, a lot of people are familiar with the concept about pods. That is the group that you work in. So, for example, on a show I was on early on, one of the art department tested positive. This was part of the general testing. I was not working as a CCO on that job, but I was part of the discussion. One person tested positive, and I'm not sure how that happened. Meaning, did he test positive because his family got tested or because the crew was tested? In any case, because he was a member of the art department, the requirement for whether or not you might have been exposed to that person is whether or not you shared the same space with that person for over 15 minutes with masks and PPE on, or any amount of time without that, PPE. Meaning that is what the health department has determined as being an exposure. Everybody in that pod was basically furloughed and then tested. Because it was determined that it was that group of people that person might have infected. And then the whole crew was informed that it happened, and they did set up testing for everyone, but that's sort of done on a case-by-case basis. But the identity of the person that tested positive is rarely revealed because it's not necessary. Right. They are required under a very strict set of protocols as to what to do to anybody that person may have come in contact with, and to notify them as to what their risk was, and then provide them with either testing or time off or quarantine. That is, again, there's a whole bunch of rules as it relates to quarantine and exposure that is done on a case-by-case basis. But if there's any reason you might have been exposed, you will be notified.
Okay. And if I myself test positive, because of the tests that production gave me, who's going to notify me? Is it?
I also run a COVID-19 testing company called Screen Test LA. The laboratory that we work with that processes all of our samples will notify everybody that got tested individually automatically. That happens the moment because their email address is part of the intake. Then the lab notifies them directly that they tested positive. As soon as that test result is available. They get notified the same time I do as the testing company. Then we also notify production because production paid for it. The patient authorized us to notify their employer because the employer was the one that tested them in the first place. We notify them within a very short period of time, usually a matter of hours. Later that somebody on the crew, somebody of the people that we tested for that production tested positive. They then do, again, the same thing we were talking about, the protocols that are required for removal from the production, whether or not the production needs to shut down or who might have been exposed.
Yeah,
for example, you might get tested, but you were never on set.
Right.
So you can't work, but you didn't expose anybody there. Or, whatever the circumstance is, it just depends on the specific.
Yeah, like I was on my way to a fitting for a job, and before I got there, they said, "Hold up, you may not be allowed because someone has tested positive." And then before I got there, they said, actually, it was someone in a completely different zone from where you're going to be for your fitting. So no one in the wardrobe department or that building or anyone who they've come in contact with was positive. So you're safe to go. So I went, I did my fitting, and that was that.
Yeah, it's actually quite strict. Again, this is part of the contact tracing, and that's why that's important. Because you don't want to put people out of work when it's not necessary, when there was no risk. So we know how the virus is transmitted very specifically, the airborne transmission, and therefore we have a very good bead on whether or not you might have been exposed to that person in a way where you might have contracted it.
Okay. If I get a job on some TV show, is there any way for me to find out? Well, obviously, I'm not gonna report to set, or they're not gonna call me to set if I'm gonna be working with someone who's tested positive.
Oh,
but is there any way for me to know how many positive tests that production has had over some period of time?
No. It would be, how shall I put this, inflammatory to know. It doesn't mean anything. If they've done everything right, as long as they followed the rules, it wouldn't matter how many, because there are all kinds of reasons why that might be true, having nothing to do with whether or not the production is doing what they're supposed to do. So there really isn't any way. There's no central database. This is all done on an individual by individual basis. And again, it has to go back to HIPAA, which is a term that a lot of people aren't familiar with, or is misused a great deal. HIPAA has to do with patient privacy of their medical information. We are regulated by that, but production is not, because they're not a healthcare provider. But you have to protect the medical privacy of everyone involved. So the other way around to look at this is everyone here to understand that if you test positive, no one that doesn't have a direct need to know will be told, or will that be revealed. That's against the law. I can't tell anybody that somebody that I tested positive, except the people that need to know, which is the patient themselves and the production that had the test done, so that they can do appropriate contact tracing. But no one else legally is allowed to know. Or, as you say, the statistics on how many positives you had on a particular production, there is no central way or requirement for that.
Okay. So got a question from someone who is a screenwriter and has also worked as a COVID compliance officer. Why is there inconsistency in the amount of tests from set to set, right? So some productions will test a lot more than others, or a lot less than others. Why is that the case?
Well, because the rules as far as DHS is concerned are a little looser than, because production is deciding how many, for as was discussed before, for example, commercials are not required to test because of the short term of the test. Now that may change, as Katie was mentioning, with the new AICP agreement that's coming out soon. It is generally speaking a requirement that actors get tested most often, because, and anybody that is in zone A, red zone, zone 1, there's a lot of different terminology out there. Keep in mind that the actors are generally the only people that are allowed to interact with others without having PPE, without having masks and face shields on. The people that are working around them are required to have both face masks and face shields under the protocol, because a lot of times they aren't, because they can't. As well, they are tested most often because a lot of times actors are with each other inside that 6-foot distance without their masks on, because otherwise you can't film.
Right.
So they are generally speaking required to be tested 3 times a week. Depends on what type of production you're on, but that, and then generally the rest of the crew once a week. However, productions have decided for themselves to test more often than that, because just out of an abundance of caution. They are concerned, especially the larger production companies are very concerned about liability. So they want to make sure that if there is some question about whether or not they were doing what they were supposed to do, or somebody got exposed because they were on that production, that they have some liability protection. We say, no, we tested people. And we did the required PCR testing, because, by the way, PCR testing is the only one that is allowed, both by SAG and by DHS and by the FDA, for screening and for asymptomatic people. Anybody that's getting an antigen test or an antibody test is not getting the proper test. It's not legal. It has to be a laboratory-based PCR to be FDA approved.
Do you know what are the brands of PCRs that are being used right now? Is there a difference? I feel like there's been talk that some are better than others. I'm pretty ignorant about that. What do you have to say about that?
There are literally hundreds of different, what you would call brands, primarily because they are developed by the laboratories themselves. So our lab has a test, another lab, and there's at least 24 labs here in Los Angeles alone, because these are regular virology labs. They're not, there's some set up specifically for COVID-19. Many of them, including ours, have been in existence for 20 and 30 years. Mostly what they do is process requests from doctors and from hospitals for virus tests, such as HIV, for example. They do HIV testing too. They are the laboratory that processes the sample that was collected at the hospital when you're a patient. They develop their own test, which is then approved by the FDA individually. So there are some of the larger ones that people have heard of, but the truth is every lab either uses one that is made by a specific manufacturer, like Moderna makes tests as well as the vaccines. 3M, Johnson and Johnson is a brand of test. But there are many tests. So there's, and to answer your other question, there is no real difference in terms of quality, safety, efficacy, accuracy from one PCR test to another. PCRs are very strictly regulated by the FDA. You have to get FDA approval under the emergency use authorization, otherwise known as the EUA. In order for doing COVID-19 testing, because that only started, the beginning of this year that they developed this test. And they are all basically the same, both the nasal swab and the oral swab, for as long as it is a PCR laboratory process test, the accuracy of virtually the same. It's over a 99% accuracy. And there's virtually no difference from one to another.
Okay. So I've got a few people asking, some version of, it doesn't make sense to me to not test every day, because I could test fine. I'm negative. I'm good to go. I shoot all day. I go home that night. And then I decide to, go hang out with friends for some stupid reason. Contract the virus that night, and then the next day I'm going in and I'm testing negative again because it doesn't show up, right? So a lot of people are saying, like, doesn't it not make sense? And I'm going to take a stab at this before I get to your more expert opinion. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's not 100% safe, and there's people have the freedom, unfortunately, to be unsafe. We have sort of guidelines in place. We do expect people to be smart. We do expect people to take precautions. But I'd be curious to know, Paul, are there conversations on set, particularly in that safety meeting, of hey, dummies, don't go to a bar with friends tonight? Like, is there conversation on set of, like, how to behave once you leave work, when Paul isn't there to tell him how to behave?
Well, not to put too fine a point on that. However, if you don't know that by now, I don't think you're paying attention. Nobody is. I mean, we're in lockdown in Los Angeles. Unless you're at work, you should be at home. And if you're not at home, about the only place you should be is at your doctor's office or at the grocery store. That's about it. Nothing. You can't go out. You can't. Congregating is not allowed right now. It's against the law. So there's that. So there is some discussion of it, but I think there's also an assumption of we're all adults here. There's a certain amount of personal responsibility involved. Having said that,
I don't mean to laugh, but right, there's the assumption that we all have working brains. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So, and on a more technical level, what that person said is not totally inaccurate, or it is accurate. You could test negative one day and positive for another if you were exposed some days ago. That is absolutely true. Incubation period is 3 to 14 days. If you were exposed, and you do become infected and you do test positive, you will test positive somewhere between 3 and 14 days from the time you were exposed. Basically the same as the flu in that respect. I as a medic, I get asked all the time, hey, I feel a little tickle in my throat. And I think maybe I've got something coming on. Is there something you can do to, like, kick it out and make sure I don't get sick? It's like, no, I can't. You've already had it. If you're sick and you have the flu, you were exposed 2 days ago, and there's nothing I can do. You can take the flu vaccine. That'll help with symptoms a little bit. But the truth is, once you start to feel symptoms, once you're symptomatic, you're already infected. So having said that, understand that you could, on average, it generally is said that about 6 days is the average. So it's, first of all, from the time you may have been exposed, you're not going to test positive the following day. Even if you do come down with it, it's going to be at least 3 days. And then that's why we test periodically. That's why actors are tested basically, if it's 3 days a week, that's for all intents and purposes every other day. And we've worked some larger commercials, because some of the major commercial production companies, we're their preferred vendor for COVID testing. We were testing 105 people every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And that was in order to be able to catch it as best we can. But to be fair, it is extraordinarily expensive to do that kind of testing. It can be upwards of a fifth to a sixth of the overall production cost.
Yeah, I know. If I remember correctly, Grey's Anatomy is spending about $1 million a week on all of their precautions.
And if you think about it, that's probably about what their budget was before this per episode. You know, I mean, what did we say? Yeah, a couple of $100,000 a week or a day is your average production on set cost, right?
Yeah.
So imagine what the truth is, you couldn't test every day and have filming. You
Right.
just can't do it. That was part of the negotiation between the unions and the state, and the county to get the protocols in place. Was it had to be effective as best we can and as best we understood the way the virus works. It also had to be practical, because if we were required to test once or twice a day, because at some point you're going to test positive in there, or somebody is, it wouldn't be practical.
Yeah, that's cost prohibitive. Are you a member of SAG-AFTRA? Do you have to be one to be a CCO?
No.
Okay.
Rob, in fact, CCO, health safety, is a non-roster position at the moment. There is some talk about unionizing it. Many, if not most, of your CCOs are also medics, because it was a natural part of what we do. It is considered by local lady to actually be part of a medic's job, or at least it's in that department, because we are doing health screening. So so many, if not most, of the CCOs are either medics, union or non-union, or at least have some kind of medical background. Because, as we often say, just because you running a fever when you show up, sure, you're not going to be allowed on set, but there could be a whole lot of reasons why you have a fever. We might want to, the medic should look at that person as well, because once they arrive, they're already on payroll. They're an employee. It's our responsibility as both CCOs and production and medical department and health safety department, to make sure that we find out why that person's running a fever, why not feeling well, and treat them appropriately. It might not be appropriate to send them home. It might be appropriate to send them to the hospital. There's a whole thing. We should evaluate them medically as well.
Paul, I really appreciate you being here. Can you hang around for a little while longer in case some more questions pop up for you?
I can. We actually have at least two CCOs here. Leslie Lytle, who's also on this call, is as well as a COVID compliance officer. She's with us as well.
Fantastic. Okay, great.
I'll be.
So I'm gonna turn off your video, but I'm glad you're still around. Let's see, and then okay, perfect. Great. Let me go back to the questions we have in here. Agents can't commission on COVID testing, right? Correct. They cannot commission your COVID test payments. Someone asked, why does the pay vary for the COVID test? So it's one price for film and TV and one price for commercials. Whether you're let me back up on that, on answering that. I don't want to answer that incorrectly. Hey, Val, can I call on you? I want to ask you about what to do if you don't want to work. I'm gonna unmute you, and you tell me if you'd rather not come on video. If that's okay.
I am camera ready, baby.
Oh yes. Okay, great. Great. Let me. Kevin, could you make Val a co-host so that she can start her video? Great. You're good to go, Val.
Starting video.
There you are.
I have wine. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, we all need it. Hi, it's nice to see you.
Hi, friend.
Hi. So I had a conversation with my agent about this today, and I wanted to talk to you about it as well. People are antsy, right? And people don't want. When I say people, I mean members, and they don't want to piss anybody off, right? So let's run through some hypotheticals and you tell me how you would respond as an agent. All right.
Okay.
Val, for anyone who doesn't know, is a fantastic agent at KMR. So let's say I'm an actor who does not feel comfortable working at all right now. Like maybe I'm high risk, or maybe I have a rich uncle and I don't, I'm good. Should I tell you that?
Yes. Book out.
Book out.
Problem solved. Yep. Just send an email. I mean, I would say send an email to your reps and say, I am not comfortable going, or, okay, so the question becomes, when this all started 10 months ago, we kind of sent a questionnaire, for lack of a better term, it was a Google form, to all our clients saying, what are you comfortable with? Because at the time, something that was being broadly entertained was the concept of shooting in your own home, shooting just with your own camera. Are you okay having production drop a kit off for you? Are you not okay with anybody coming into your home? And so, like you said earlier, it's just communication. If you are not comfortable being on set right now, that's fine. Judgment-free zone. Just share that with your rep now before you get too knee-deep in auditions.
So, so if I were to tell you, I don't feel comfortable auditioning until I get the vaccine, that's that you're not going to drop me?
I would support that 110%. I don't feel comfortable going into my own office until I can have the vaccine myself. So I get it.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now everyone's different, but I would agree with that statement. No problem.
Now, let's say I booked something in November, right? And they pushed it to right now, right? I think probably the numbers, I don't know for certain, but I feel like the numbers were a little better in November than they are now. I feel like they've gotten worse. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe it's whatever's in the actor's head. But anyway, I booked something and I no longer want to do it. I don't feel safe anymore. What does that conversation look like? If I were to say that to you, what would be your response?
I mean, I can't think. So this is a commercial conversation, I believe, and I'm a commercial agent. I don't know that that's even a likely scenario, but if you are not comfortable going to set anymore, again, communication, right? Like, my job is I work for you. I am your rep and I do basically whatever you tell me to do. And if that means that you are not comfortable going to set, that's fine. We need to find a classy and tasteful way to communicate that to casting. I think in this weird environment, casting is very understanding. So, but you need to speak up ahead of time, not while you're on set. Like, we give you, hopefully, God willing, ample opportunity to speak up at audition, callback, avail, before we get to the point where I'm pulling you off of a set because you're no longer comfortable. But stranger things could probably happen. This is a day-by-day kind of thing. We'll see how it shakes out. But again, communicate.
Have there been any instances of someone booking something and it was supposed to shoot in California and then they move it someplace like, I don't know,
Las Vegas, Phoenix, St. Louis? Yes. That is happening right now on jobs we are currently casting.
Okay. And has it happened though that someone's booked an LA spot that gets moved, and in that situation, is it sort of kosher to be like, whoa, I didn't know I was going to have to fly. I'm not down with that.
God willing, casting is re-clearing, for lack of a better term, that before it happens. I have a couple jobs, like I have a guy on avail right now, and the shoot literally has just been moved to a different state. So a casting director, a good casting director that is doing their job, will contact us and re-clear and make sure that actor is okay flying. Because again, like, part of our little Google form that we sent out is, are you comfortable getting on a plane and flying somewhere right now? And again, if that's a no-go for you, got it, great, respect that. We just want to know that ahead of time. So we're trying to give it as many opportunities to try to nip it before it gets to the point of pissing people off and burning bridges. But if we have to piss people off and burn bridges, I'm going to drop the F-bomb. Fuck them. Like, this is your safety first, period. Like, no commercial is worth risking your health, life for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And have there been any casting directors who've requested actors who've said, "Hey, you didn't submit Amir on this job. I'd love to see him." And if I had said, "Oh yeah, I'm booked out till vaccine," what did you tell casting that? Like, did you tell casting, "Oh yeah, Amir's booked out until there's a vaccine"? First of all, do you say that? And second of all, if you say that, what's the response to that?
Right. I literally had this happen this week. A director requesting an actor who was not in the submission. And my response to casting is, well, the last I have heard is Amir doesn't feel comfortable being on set, but I will double check that, because the last thing I want you as the actor to hear is, and I'm just picking a name because why not? Christopher Guest was requesting me. You didn't tell me that. Why didn't you tell me that?
Right.
It's like, well, we had you booked out. You didn't want to do anything. Yeah, but I mean, it's Christopher Guest. And it's like, okay, well, had I known that, it's just a game I don't want to play. And so is my coworker, Jamie. We're over communicators. I would rather run it by you and hear again, God, Christopher Guest, but no, versus you hearing about it through the grapevine. Like, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you tell me? That just doesn't set well with me and my soul as a communication professional.
Yeah.
So I literally, this has happened this week. The girl zoomed straight to callback. She is on avail right now, and she's on avail right now.
Yeah.
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 I mean,
Right.
it's not Christopher Guest. Like, that was,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Sure.
like my job, like, and it's kind of the same thing almost at renegotiations, right? Like, I am obligated to bring any offer to you, and then we have a bigger conversation about it and we make a decision as a team, or, well, I'm part of your team, I work for you. So again, it's about over communication. I will bring you any request just so you're aware of it. What you want to do with it after that, I get on board with.
Yeah. It's tough. I get the sense that, well, you're obviously you're one of the best agents at one of the best companies, and I have a really good agent that I have a relationship with that sounds like the type of relationship you have with your clients. I'm curious what actors should do if they are not lucky enough to have an agent like you, or like I have, that have you heard of this? Have you heard of agents pressuring actors to audition, or, hey, if you don't audition for Allie Horn this week, then she's going to forget about you? Like, have you heard about that happening?
Well, I mean, off the record, Allie Horn is tough to get in with. I can understand the pressure to try to keep that relationship. But I mean, no, unfortunately, I think I'm surrounded by good people, and a reason why I get along so well with your agent, like, we have similar mindsets. We literally will be texting with each other. Like, I'm texting with other agents in town about bullshit that we are trying to address, versus, like, if not even COVID related. Like, it makes me so sad to imagine that there are actors in positions where their agent is pressuring them. And my number one response is, if we weren't in this weird, fucked up environment, is you need to shop for a new agent. But then again, I also acknowledge that, like, agents like KMR, we're not taking rep meetings right now. Like, that makes absolutely no sense when I have 20 auditions tomorrow to be looking for new talent. Like, my number one priority is to generate activity for the people that I already represent. I can't take on any more right now. Yeah. So there is, unfortunately, I have no answer for that. If people have an answer, I am open to it. But other than, it just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I see Aaron. Hi,
Aaron. Val, thank you so much for being here. I know you're going to be on for a little while longer, so if I can, if something else comes up, I'd love to come back to you.
I would love that, because I mean, we have had a couple of different COVID situations, which I'd love to just kind of not run up the flagpole, but just share with you guys and kind of let you know like what's happened on our
You know
side
what?
of
No,
things.
please go right ahead, Val.
Yeah.
I'm
So
curious to
one thing that came up was being paid for your COVID test time. Correct. We don't commission that. But if you want to make life super, super easy for yourself, please, when you sign your contract, if they are giving you a paper contract on set or even an e-version of it, because a lot of sets are trying to go paperless to avoid the person-to-person handing off of here's this pen and here's this contract that 4 people have already touched, is along the top, you usually have that in-out time card. Make sure that your COVID test is listed up there along with your wardrobe and along with your in and out times the day of your shoot. Because what people forget sometimes is this then goes to a payroll company who is maybe, they're always off site, maybe they're even in a different state. They weren't on set with you. They only pay what they see on that contract. So shit you not, whatever, I've already said the F word many times today. Why am I worried about shit? I have chased so many missing COVID wardrobe time payments. It is ridiculous. Like, because also we being KMR are running on a skeleton staff right now. Also, we had assistants and support staff furloughed. And now it's become my job to chase your missing $89 COVID fee,
which you don't even commission,
which I don't even get the $8.90 from. I'm okay with that, guys. Like, I don't need that $8.90, please. But make life super easy. And if that means that you have to say, and I know actors don't want to be the squeaky wheel, but if that means saying to your second AD, hey, how do I get my COVID time noted on this? Speak up for yourself. You're not being an asshole about it. It's a legitimate question. But the payroll companies, Extreme Reach is only going to pay what they see on that contract. And if there's no COVID time, even though they probably should know by now, oh, they're shooting during COVID, they pay what's on the contract. That is what they are obligated to. So make your life super easy and ask about getting that noted on your contract.
Thank you.
Please and thank you.
Good tip.
Good tip. We have booked COVID backups at this point on so many different levels, meaning we have booked people that go to set and sit basically awkwardly in crew and cast parking until the booked on-camera principal does his little temperature and pre-check and then gets to go to work. We've booked COVID backups that are paid to sit at home while that is happening, just to be on call. And I think Katie kind of touched on this too, is the difference between being left on avail as a COVID backup. The terminology is kind of out there. Like, if you are booked as a COVID backup, you should be paid in some way for your time. They say, like, I have a guy right now that is still technically just on avail as the COVID backup, which is kind of a cheap way to address it. But I get it. And if something comes up in his world, I have to let the casting director know. But that's happened. I had a now, say, former client, and this is something that I would love to hear Paul's take on this, is we have heard that if you test positive, you potentially continue to test positive for 2 to 3 months after that, because the test cannot tell the difference between the active virus and the dead virus that your body is still shedding. So along the lines of communication, I would recommend, but again, I'm not a doctor and I don't want to encroach on your privacy, but if you have already battled this virus, to share that with your reps, because there is a strong possibility, as this happened to me in December, that an actor booked a commercial, knowingly had fought and won, thank God, but had battled COVID and didn't tell us. And then 3 weeks later, booked a commercial and the test came back positive. And that was news to us. And the first thing production did when they saw that positive test is immediately replace them. They were not up for discussion. They were not entertaining anything. And it was at that point too late for me to try to salvage it at all. So the question becomes for us as agents and you as actors is, at what point are you comfortable, if at all, with me sharing with Ross Lacey, again, picking a name because I'm looking at it right now, the possibility that you may come back positive from a previous battle with this? Because what we don't want is production freaking the F out and then replacing you and running around like madness.
So Paul, thanks for jumping back on. That's a really great question. I feel like if I've beat COVID and I'm no longer contagious, I should be able to work. But what I don't want to necessarily tell everyone and their mother that I had it 2 months ago, if that's going to mean that I can't work. It is, how does that work, Paul?
What Valerie said is accurate. And in fact, it's not only accurate, it's unknown exactly how long you may test positive, how long you may be shedding virus. So once you test positive, you quarantine, whether or not you get sick. Almost the rest of the protocols as far as going back to work are actually not based on testing. You don't actually need to get a negative test in a certain period of time. It is based on time. So, and the protocols have changed over time. So I couldn't necessarily quote exactly what they are now, but production is familiar with them. The CCO that's going to be on set is going to know specifically what the current regulations are. Generally speaking, it's 10 days symptom-free. And there's the quarantine period. There's the whether you're symptomatic or not. But once you've tested positive, you have to go 14 days symptom-free before you're allowed to go back to work.
So, but if I beat COVID a month and a half ago, right, and I'm totally now, I have no more symptoms, totally healthy, I may test positive, and will that not keep me out of a job?
Well, the thing, that's the problem though. You don't get to use that on your next show as a reason not to test. You see, so you still have to test negative. That you may have had it, you may be over it, you may still have a detectable amount of virus. In order for, so it kind of depends on which side of it you look at. For you would be allowed to go back to work because you've had it and you've recovered, and it is assumed now that you're no longer infectious. That doesn't get you out of the requirement for your next show to test. And if you test positive, you're not going to go back to work. And it doesn't matter whether or not the reason is because you've had it and you've gotten better, because they don't care, nor should they. They need, for their reasons, for you to test negative. If I know that may be a little confusing, but
no, it's not confusing. It's disappointing. It sucks. I mean, I get it. I understand why you want everyone on your set to test negative. Like, that's sort of self-evident. But I also feel for someone who had the good fortune to beat COVID and now can't work because they're still testing positive,
Well, you're right. That's true. But you have to also remember, what do we have to go on except your word of what happened before you got here? So on my production, we required you to test 2 days before the show, which, by the way, I just want to mention one thing because I hadn't mentioned it before. It is highly recommended that if you need to go to work on Monday, don't test on Saturday, test on Friday. You need that extra time to make sure that there isn't some delay in your test, because some people wait till the last minute or try to test the day before they're going to work. That's a really poor choice of how to do this. You want to do it at least 2 working days or 2 test days beforehand. Some labs are not open on Sundays, so just keep that as an aside, because sometimes it takes 24 hours to get your results. Having said that, besides, there's no central database of verifiable history of your particular circumstance of what happened to you. So yeah, you may been testing positive because you're on the tail end of infection, not on the upswing.
Yeah.
The test has no way to differentiate that, and neither do we. So I would have no way to know. So I can't let you on set if you test positive. That's
Of course. I get it. Yeah, I get it.
But
Well,
it is actually not recommended you retest just to see if, when am I over it? Because again, that kind of thing is not nearly as diagnostic as it is before you caught it.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Val, did you have anything else that you wanted to throw in, or is that about it?
I think that's about it for now.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate you being here. I don't know when you have to leave exactly, but if you're gone.
I think I told Tiffany 7:30, but I'm so intrigued by this. I think I may at least take my earbuds out and turn on the speaker and still eavesdrop if that's cool.
That's absolutely cool. Thank you so much for being here and for your perspective. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this, Amir.
All right. I'm going to bring on my friend, Giselle Gilbert, who is not only a good friend and who has been elected to SAG-AFTRA office, but is also, just sort of like a personal fact check, because I'll get shit wrong. and Giselle will be like, yeah, so here's what you got wrong, Amir. So Kevin, if you could make Giselle a co-host so that she can start her video. And I've unmuted you, Giselle, so you can.
Thanks, pal.
Yeah.
Hi.
Nice to hear you.
I need
And
to
you're the
start.
co-host.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, Amir. Hi, guys.
All right, Giselle, what did I get wrong?
Well, first, I just want to say hi to Valerie because she's one of my agents and I love her.
Awesome.
So hi, Valerie. And also, I saw that there was someone here from Gate Check who they were the COVID compliance, or at least in charge of COVID testing for the first spot that I did in COVID, and they were great. You also get text. You go in for testing, and then they'll text you when you've tested negative, so that you can go on set. Awesome. Anyway, they're great.
Giselle, do you mind if while you start talking, I go fill up my glass of water?
Go for it. Go fill it up. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that with every production, because we don't necessarily have specific guidelines for commercials as of yet, you should be, upon booking, you should get emailed whatever that particular production is implementing. So you should be able to go through and see and go, okay, does this feel safe for me? If for some reason you don't receive that, you can request it through your agent and they'll send it to you. One thing to note too, testing is required not required. Most productions are doing testing. There are productions that aren't doing testing. So if you find that out, if you go, I don't want to do commercials that don't do testing, tell your agent ahead of time. The other thing is voiceover spots do not require testing. So I had the privilege of booking a couple of things during COVID for voiceover. They do have their own rules and regulations, and you had put in the chat the list of all of the approved voiceover studios, I think across the nation. But they don't require testing, but there are things like you can't eat or drink anything in your booth. So some of us have become accustomed. We have our own little things that we like to bring in, like apples to not be smacky, or spray, or whatever it is. Just be aware that if you go into a studio, you likely will not be able to use those things. So if you don't get that email, you can request it. The other thing too is I've had a couple of friends who've been booked as backups. And one thing that it might be easier to think of it this way, because what's the difference between a veil and a backup and on hold? And if you're getting tested as a principal, you should consider yourself employed. And if you're employed, you get paid for a session. So that was like a very easy way for me to determine whether or not a backup has been actually put on hold for those days or not. If you're on a veil as a backup, you're likely not getting tested yet. You're just sort of like a drifting in the wind. I also know that sometimes there's up to like 3 different backups on a shoot. So like someone might, might have a number 1 backup, a number 2 backup, and a number 3 backup. So those are things. I know Katie already went over the fact that the reason why the union hasn't shut down work is because we legally can't. And that was a really important thing. And I'm glad that she brought it up. But those were just the major things that I wanted to point out, is like, if there's information you want in order to feel safe on set, call the union, talk to your agent. You can get that information.
Great. Someone asked a question that I'm not sure if you have the answer to, and if not, if one of my other elves could let me know in the chat, and I'll get that answered. If I get sequestered by production, i.e., forced to quarantine before I start shooting. Now, this is happening a lot in like people are
TV.
having to fly to Canada to do a job, and in Canada, if you're coming from the U.S., you have to sit in your hotel room for 2 weeks.
And
right?
if you don't, you get like a huge fine, hundreds of thousands of dollars, as far as I know.
Yeah, it's only hundreds of thousands if you infect someone else. If not, it's just thousands.
Ah, okay.
But if you
good.
infect someone else, you can actually go to jail in Canada for up to 3 years and up to a $500,000 fine. Canada, not fucking around. But here's my question. Do you know the answer to this? If not, I know there's other people I can ask. Those 2 weeks that I'm sitting in my hotel room, what do I get paid for that?
I mean, as far as I know, you would get your session fee per day, but that could be incorrect. But as far as I know, quarantine, like you should be paid every day for that. I don't think it's like you only get paid $100 or something, you know?
Yeah, right. And okay, great. Okay. Thank you, Stacey Travis. That is quarantine pay, which is commissionable. And let me know, Stacey, is that basically a day rate?
Quarantine pay, is it commissionable?
Well, if Stacey,
that's what Stacey says. Stacey knows better than me. I know that there was some talk on the Facebook Moms page about what was commissionable and what was not.
Okay.
But
I tend to believe Stacey Travis on stuff.
Yeah.
Letting me know in the chat that it is a session fee for each of those days, or a weekly fee if it's a week, and it is commissionable, which frankly makes sense, right? Like if
it's like a session.
Yeah, I mean, if I get booked to do a week on a movie, even if I'm only shooting Monday and Friday, I'm still paying commission on that whole week, right? So yeah, okay. I've got more.
I wanted to say one other thing, which is something that Val said. Yes, we need to check our contracts, right? Like when we're on set, we should be taking pictures of everything. If you don't, I highly recommend it, especially if you're on unemployment right now. You should have your work days. You should be tracking how much you make because you do need to submit that to the EDD. But our contract, the SAG-AFTRA contract, supersedes anything that you sign on set. So if you sign a waiver on set saying like, oh, if I get sick, I won't see, like, it doesn't matter. The union has your back. Like, it's fine. Like, don't stress out so much if you forgot to make sure that your COVID test was on there. That is why you have an agent like Val who will chase down that money for you. It just takes longer for you to get paid. That's all.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Thanks, Giselle.
You're welcome.
All right. Do you have to leave? I kind of want to just like.
I can stay.
I just love Giselle. I just want to talk to her all the time. Okay, let me see if there's a question here.
There was something else I wanted to say, but I blanked on it. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Okay. So I know how much principal pay is.
I remembered.
Okay, great.
And it's really important, and it's kind of off topic, but Stacey Travis would be very proud of me for saying this, which is in the new stimulus package that we got through Congress, if you made W-2 and 1099 income last year, and your 1099 income was more than $5,000, you will get an additional $100 a week on your unemployment, but you have to call the EDD. They will not do it automatically, and it was just implemented. So go get your extra $100 a week.
I've got some more information about mixed income, and I am putting it in the chat right now. Mixedincome.org. And this is something, as far as I know, this website is, yes. So this website is national, right? So whether you're in California or whatever, visit mixedincome.org, find out if you're eligible, and that's $1,100 over 11 weeks that you can tack on to your unemployment if you are someone who has earned both W-2 and 1099 in the past. Yeah, and $1,100 is no joke. It seems
I love money.
like
So I'll take
not
it.
so much when it's $100 a week, but it's $100 a week over 11 weeks. So that does add up. Do you know the answer to this question?
Maybe.
um, the rate you're paid to get a COVID test
Yes.
is $250 for film and TV principals, $89 an hour for commercial principals. Do you know what it is for background people? Is it different? Okay. I'm gonna see if someone with a little more knowledge than you and I has that. Please.
I will say this, that we were having a discussion the other day among some of the people on the commercial performers committee. That's how we sort of figure things out as we share information, and I highly recommend you do that with all of your friends. But someone pointed out that they might be booking a job as, I think, a stand-in for a show. And for background, the way that they had the verbiage in the contract was that you could still get a COVID test and not be considered employed yet, which is different than a principal performer, right? So if you're a backup for something or you're doing something else, as soon as you go for that test, you should get paid. For background, it's a little bit different. I don't know the exact amount that they should get paid for that COVID test, but it is a little different. And if you're confused about that, you should either talk to your agent or call the union, but I'll let you bring someone else.
All right, thanks, Giselle. I want to bring on Zach Gray from Gray Talent Group, another fantastic agent. Let me find Zach Gray in my list. Sorry, folks. I gotta get better at this. Zach, you're a co-host and you're unmuted. There you are. Hi, Zach.
Hello. How's it going?
Very good. Under the circumstances. But I am pleased to have so many great people on here sharing really useful information. Tell me about what you're seeing out there as far as some of your clients and the conversations that you're having with casting and with your clients. What is the sort of temperature? Sorry to no pun intended, but what's the temperature as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I've been listening to a couple other folks and it seems like we're all kind of experiencing a lot of the same thing. And I think that one of the harder things is that every single project is different. Every single actor's approach to what they feel comfortable with is different. And, every single production has different protocols. And so one of the things that we are seeing is just kind of everything that used to be, very quick turnaround, all of that fun stuff, everything takes a little bit longer. It takes a couple more emails. It takes a couple more phone calls, which is all necessary and all important to have those conversations. In terms of work, it has been, there are hot moments and cold moments. I think I saw today on Deadline that December was the worst month for film permits since things started filming again. I'm going to also chalk that up to there being the holidays. And I think a lot of productions just kind of stepped away a little earlier than they might usually. But, it's just kind of, yeah.
Can I ask you a question? What do you see casting's attitude toward your clients who have traditionally been heavy bookers as opposed to people who they don't see often? Is there any kind of, because I've heard that casting is sort of more reticent to bring in people who they're unfamiliar with. Are you seeing that?
So I think generally speaking, no. I'm actually seeing the opposite. However, I do think that there is a caveat to that. So we have actually noticed in our, in talking to casting directors, they're requesting a lot more tapes than they normally would. And I think there's a couple reasons. One is when you are confined to a space and you have to do the intro and have to walk in and out of the room, that's added time. They can watch more self-tapes in an hour than they can see people in person. They can also watch an hour's worth of tapes when they can't sleep at 2 a.m. They can't hold auditions then. So they are requesting more self-tapes. And in addition, what they're also saying, I was talking with one casting director who works on one of the multicams, and she said that she will send out appointments and she'll only get about 80% of the tapes back. And some of her colleagues were seeing as low as 20 and 30% of the requests that they were actually getting having tapes back. So they are requesting a lot more people. I think that different shows and different cities have factors on every single project of, yes, I feel comfortable going to a set where it's just the same people, small cast. No, I don't feel comfortable shooting a scene at LAX or something like that. And so there's a lot of variables there. A lot of our actors who might not know as many casting directors have actually been having amazing years. And we've been doing really, really well with a lot of the recurring guest stars, some series regulars recently, from people who might not have traditionally been seen. Now, I think that where that, the hesitation of hiring unknowns is less on the talent, but I do think that resumes are a little bit more important because there's no room to mess around on set. If you are someone who has never been on a television set before, being on a television set for the first time during COVID is a little bit of a risk. And so where we have seen that are the people who have the resumes of they've been on set, they've been hired before. I think that there's a little bit more leaning on that because what you miss out on the self-tape is a little bit of that conversation. Can you get a good sense of, is this person going to be someone you want on set? Is this, as a couple people have mentioned, they're showing up on set for the first time. You don't know where they're coming from. And so I think that there is a little bit of that of, has this person been on a professional set before? Just because there are different things of who do I go to talk to if I have this question? Where, I arrive, now what? And so if you have a little bit, have you experienced that before? I think there's a little more trust of being on set. But in terms of, seeing tapes, we've noticed an increase looking outside of kind of the people who are called in all of the time.
Wow. Okay. That's actually reassuring, right? I was definitely worried that it was going to be very much a sort of rich get richer type of situation, but I'm happy to hear that the self tapes have been a bit of a democratizing, or had a bit of a democratizing effect.
Yeah. I will say one of my other concerns too, when things were starting to film again, was there was a lot of talk of kind of nixing any of the co-star or guest star roles to kind of just have the series regulars, because those are the actors you have commitments to. You can really kind of cut down and, have fewer people in the scene and having fewer people on set. Largely speaking, I haven't seen that. Sure, there are a couple scenes where we have a client on a show who was pinned for an additional episode today. They released the pin because they cut the scene because they're trying to cut down right now with the surges of how many actors are on set. But in large part, my big concern was that a lot of kind of the day-to-day, supporting roles would be cut to just focus on the series regulars. I really haven't seen too much of that, which has been very encouraging because I think that is so much of the lifeblood of actors in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and that was such a big concern this summer that they were like, well, this is the death of co-stars. Yeah. And gosh, I mean, I absolutely understand that fear, but it's good to hear that hasn't borne itself out. That's really great. What else, Zach? What are you seeing that you feel like actors need to hear right now?
I think that I think that what is very, one of the things we've noticed and kind of been encouraging some of our actors to do, what you miss by not being in the room is sometimes casting directors might give you a little bit of that adjustment. And one of the concerns that I had pre-COVID was when they would watch tapes, oh, we liked him, it's close, we don't want to make them, reset up and reshoot for a note. Or, they have that small adjustment that they would give in the room. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot of casting directors request, and even if the casting directors don't request this, I might request this, send in a couple takes. I am generally someone who is anti a couple takes. And the reason being is because I think that an actor needs to make the choices of, this is how I would do it if you pay me to do it. And when you send in 6, 7, 8 takes that are just all completely different, it kind of says to me that I don't really know what I want to do with this role. So I like to usually focus in on, what are your choices? What are you most happy about? However, I do think that there is an increase here of send in 2 reads, send in one where, hey, I might do a little button at the end slightly differently. If it's going to be different enough, obviously, if it's two of the same takes, we don't need them. But I do know a lot of casting directors are requesting, multiple takes, which I think that kind of takes care of that. I do think that self tapes for the first round, we already saw some casting directors who were doing first round self tapes already pre-COVID. I do think that for a very long time, it's my understanding that I think some commercial auditions have moved to back into in-person auditions. I think that on the theatrical side, you are going to continue to see a lot of at least first person. We've had people test for pilots via Zoom. It's very weird and different. I think the other thing that I tell a lot of our actors too is producers are aware. Casting directors are aware of the situation. And, I do think that, they are a little bit more understanding when it comes to that. If there's a little lag in the video of the reader, but at the end of the day, I think that for us, what we're looking for in the tapes that we're sending is just a very clear, concise. I've made some choices because there are going to be more tapes. I think it's a little bit harder to stand out, and so really making choices that are true to who you are as a performer and really bring a lot of you into the role, I think are now more important than ever.
Awesome. Zach, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and being here.
Of course, thanks so much for having me.
I think you have to go, but if something else comes up, I'll see if I can circle back to you. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Zach. I really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. So I have a question that I'd like to put out to the room. We're going to have, hey, Jen Levin. Okay, great. Ross is on. So I have a question that maybe Ross could answer, and maybe some of our broadcasters could answer. So I'll ask the question and then let me know in the chat if you feel comfortable weighing in on this. But I feel like there's a lot of people in this country who are still not taking the pandemic, the virus, seriously. And I wonder if part of that is that it sort of feels like an invisible pandemic, right? Like it's not like it was during like Vietnam when we were seeing these images of coffins and soldiers and being graphic, but like legs being blown off, right? We had reporters embedded in war zones, and that's still a thing that's happening. Or, if you look at like the civil rights movement, right? What happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a lot of white people were not really believing that it was so bad for Black people until they saw, people like John Lewis on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, again, forgive the graphicness, but getting their heads bashed in, right? So I've been wondering if there's a way that we could embed reporters in ERs. That feels sort of crazy to me. But I also felt like, is that the only way we're going to get people to believe? So I'm wondering, like, Ross, you're an ER doctor. Joy Benedict is a broadcaster. Joy, would you let me know in the chat if I can bring you into this, if I can turn your video and your audio on? I feel like we're not seeing people, intubated with the tubes in their mouths. We're not seeing these packed hospital rooms as much because we're trying to protect people's privacy and stuff. Okay, so Joy said I do have her permission to bring her in. So Kevin, if you could make Joy a co-host, and I believe I just unmuted Joy. There she is. Okay, so you can start your video now, Joy. Can you talk to me about embedding? Hi, nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you guys. I don't have any makeup on or my ring light.
You look fantastic. Can you talk to me about the feasibility of like embedding reporters in ERs? And like, I know it's sensitive, but I wonder if that's a way that we can sort of get people to really see what the heck is going on. I saw Sarah Sidner on CNN break down crying after she was talking.
Sarah's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. I know Sarah, she works out of Los Angeles. I've seen her on a lot of stuff. She was, I mean, as phenomenal as you can be during a lot of the BLM protests in June when it's such a tough topic. But she has been in the field a really long time and also did a lot of stuff in the Middle East earlier on in her career. So for her to get emotional like that, you also have to understand she's tired, right? CNN is not SAG-AFTRA. They are not a union shop, and they are a 24-hour news agency. So that's also something to think about. She's most likely very exhausted as well. Yeah. But I will say this, there have been a lot of reporters who have gone into ERs. We, for CBS Network, a SAG-AFTRA member, Maria Villarreal, she was down in South Texas for a long time in emergency room. So we do it. It just takes obviously a lot of protocol. It takes a lot of setup and a lot of the safety. But she was in the hospital down there for a long time when those first hospitals started getting overrun. So what we typically do on a daily or weekly level is the hospitals send us what's called video handout video, because they have people inside the hospital that shoot video for us, and then they email us the links. That's the freshest way to get video as quickly as possible, because it's not that we wouldn't go in there or I wouldn't go in there. I mean, I go to Skid Row, I go to the airport, I go to all of these places each and every day. I knock on doors, I do MOSs. I mean, my job has not changed significantly despite this pandemic. I just may do it differently, but I'm still interviewing for the most part, people in person. So, somebody has to go to the food giveaways and talk to the people who are hungry. If I don't do that, you don't hear from them. And it's the same thing when it comes to the hospitals. The difference is just the security and the time that it gets in there. And let's be honest, the last thing these overrun hospitals need is a camera crew. So they sent in one of their PR people. We've gotten a lot of video of cell phone footage, especially when the vaccines arrived. The nurses, not even PR people, but the nurses or the office administrators, people were already in the hospital shooting all this video for us and sending it to us. So we're forever thankful for that. It's called handout video. But we do go. I mean, we show the video. The problem I think that we have when it comes to news coverage is people have to be smart consumers of information. And I say that a lot, and some people find it offensive, but if you're choosing to get your news from Instagram, from your favorite blogger, then you have to be responsible for the fact that you may not know everything, right? You have to pick whatever news source it is that you find credible, that you believe in, and search around. And if you see something the first time and it seems too good to be true, just like shopping, try a different one, But if ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN, and even Fox, if you're all telling you the same thing, then it's probably true, right? So that's what and that's hardest for me with some of our younger viewers is I have to say, be a smarter consumer of information. You have a responsibility to yourself to get the facts straight before you see a meme on Instagram and repost it because you automatically think it's true.
Yeah.
As for your concern about whether people don't believe it, I don't. We do have a handful of those who are just adamant like this isn't an issue. The thing I hear the most is it's just like the flu. It's no different than any other virus. And it is a virus, right? It's not anthrax. Okay. If someone happens to have COVID and you walk into the room and out the same door, you're not automatically going to start bleeding from your eyes, right? It's a virus. So it's all about the number of spores you get in your close proximity, and the science is forever changing, but we do know that it transmits faster in, close proximity and indoor environments, which is what a lot of, the shoots are, right? Whereas I do most of my interviews outside as a way to, protect myself. But so I get more the people, it's not that they don't believe that it's out there, but they believe that it's such a small percentage of the population that their lifestyle shouldn't change to adjust for it. And that's not an issue just in Los Angeles, that's an issue all over the world. Mm-hmm. It's, that the argument of, your rights end where my rights begin, which is, the basis of a lot of legal discussion. So, and when you have people who are literally hungry, right, who haven't worked, who can't pay their rent, who are facing homelessness, they would rather find a way to work, even though they're not supposed to be working, in order to deal with the immediate problem, which is their livelihoods.
Yeah.
So that's why you see, you know, nail salons are closed, but there's wrapping paper on all those windows because almost all of them are working.
Oh yeah. I've seen
Right?
all of these gyms that are closed and
Right.
are all like boarded up. No, they're doing some CrossFit in there.
There's some things going in those windows.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if I answered your question or if I just rambled for a few minutes.
No. I appreciate knowing that that we are getting a look inside ERs.
Some of the video is stale. Like, I wish we got it more often. I wish I could go in there every day. You know, but I personally have not been in an ER during this time. I've been outside when the field hospitals have gone up, and then they send me video from inside the ER. They'll bring doctors out. We do a lot of Zoom interviews. We probably do a Zoom interview with a medical professional 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Trying to get that out.
It's funny, like but I think when we talk about talking with medical professionals, it's you know what they say about a picture is worth 1,000 words. You know,
right.
when I talk about the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I don't know what image is going to convince people to take this seriously, and maybe there isn't one.
And maybe I see the images because I see them come down on the feed. I see them come down on the newscast. So I know they're out there. Right. You know, USC sent us probably some of the best of their overrun critical care units, but you have a lot of patient issues. So you're going to see a lot of blurred dots over people's faces because they aren't going and asking this person who's dying, can I show your face, right? So they have to be very careful about how they show it. And then we also had an issue, this is more of a legal thing, but there was some video that surfaced early in the pandemic from France. And then the US kept running it anytime we had generic COVID video, but it didn't even have anything to do with the United States. So, you know, all the attorneys, and we keep getting emails about don't show the France video, you know, but it's so compelling. We want to show it. People see it. And they assume it's in the United States. But what we try to do, and I only know for my station, I do a lot of victim interviews, not people who have COVID, but people who've lost someone who had COVID. On Sunday, that was my second story with a pregnant woman who gave birth and died a few days later. Jesus. Because they're contracting COVID in, you know, month 8, month 7, and they're trying to hang on. And their only underlying condition is the fact that they're pregnant. But that's a big one. And they're dying at like the age of one was 34, 36. And they're inducing labor, they're giving birth, and they're dying 3 days later. And it's absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
So that's how we try to show it. We do one, you know, 3 times a day. We try and do a COVID victim, someone who's died, to put a face to the story and to the pandemic. But, you know. Yeah,
I mean, it's such a public service you're doing.
And people don't want to see it. They don't want to listen.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's COVID fatigue. Yeah. Well, Joy, I appreciate you hopping on. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. If anyone has any questions for Joy, go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll bring her back into the room. Joy, where do you work again?
I work for CBS.
CBS, that's right. Okay.
CBS 2, CBS News Path, CBS Network. Yeah.
Great. So if anyone has any questions for Joy, put them in the chat, please. Thank you so much, Joy. All right, let me check the, Kevin said that maybe we should go over some of the things I went over at the very top in case there's people who are getting here new. So are voiceover studios safe? Yes, we put that link in the chat. I think, again, one of the biggest question is why is SAG-AFTRA allowing production to continue? So first of all, SAG-AFTRA doesn't have the legal ability to shut down shooting, but what SAG-AFTRA can do is make sure that if there's shooting happening, it's as safe as possible, and that's what those protocols are all about. Look, there's people right now who are saying there should not be any shooting, stop all the shooting, right? And then there's other people who are like, I have no other way of making income and the government is not taking care of me. I haven't worked in my restaurant since March. please let me shoot a commercial. Please let me shoot a guest star on station 19 or whatever, right? It's incredibly complicated, and I could not empathize more with everyone who's looking around going, why the fuck is this happening? Right? Not like literally, like in the global sense of what is going on. I think SAG-AFTRA has had to make some tough decisions, and obviously it's debatable if they're the best, but I think they're very, very, very good. So yeah, if you want to work right now, you're allowed to. If you don't want to work, you don't have to, right? Let me see. Anything else I need to sort of go over? Folks, we have an ER doctor in the Zoom right now. If anyone has any questions for our ER doctor, Ross is here. Ask away. I am seeing sort of a slowdown on questions. Let me see here. Yeah, we're out of questions right now. So ask away. Oh, right. Okay, this is great. Stacy mentioned this is an important thing to mention. If your friend did a job on the WB lot, they had a specific way of doing all their tests and all their protocols and the testing company, and do you go inside for the swab or you're swabbing outside, this and that. And they're gonna have some website where you find out if you're positive or negative. That's gonna be different from studio to studio, right? Some of them are going to be using the same ones, but it may differ, right? Sometimes it's incredibly straightforward, and sometimes it's a little more complicated. I had one person say, gosh, it was like I was filling out a home loan, which sounded terrifying, because for me, I did an Apple TV show. It's incredibly straightforward. I was watching TV while I was filling out my test stuff. So, but every time you're going to be asked to go through the protocols, do the testing, all of that, you're going to get an email that says, if you have any questions, call this number. So call that number, call your agent. And if you can't get clarity, call the union. I think one thing that is worth reiterating is that everyone is figuring all of this stuff out, and everyone knows that everyone's figuring all this stuff out. So having questions is not bad. Ask questions. Having fears is not bad. Get clarity, right? Express your fears to the people who are there to take care of you, right? Your agent is working for you, there to take care of you. Your union is there to take care of you and get you the information you need. And if you're confused, get information, right? Okay, so I have a question here. Okay, so this is a great question. Why can't performers get essential status since we have to work without protection, right? Why aren't we considered essential workers? I can't think of any other field in which this is the case. Well, yeah, I can't think of any other field where people have to work without masks, right? Now, the thing about the phrase essential worker is it doesn't actually sort of mean anything, right? There's no dictionary definition of essential, right? It kind of depends on a lot of factors. I think at its base, people tend to think essential workers are like food workers, safety workers, but depending on the industry, that industry may have done some lobbying to get someone who may not have been considered essential by most people as essential. Case in point, our union lobbied hard to get our residuals processing team labeled as essential, so that as soon as everything shut down, they were still processing residuals, right? And the reason that's essential is because we need our money to be able to pay our rent and to buy our food, right? So that's an example of an essential worker that people might not have thought about. why can't performers get essential status? That's a complicated question that I don't really know the answer to. I see Paul has raised his hand. So Kevin, if you could put Paul back as a co-host and see if you have any thoughts on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I was just a slight clarification because we have kept pretty close track of this. In fact, we are considered essential workers in terms of the state of California. It's the reason why we are not currently under lockdown. In other words, restaurants can't serve people, except to go, right?
Do you know, Paul, if actors are considered essential in other states?
That part I don't know. I'm only talking about California, but in California, the whole of the entertainment industry is considered essential workers in so far as we are allowed to continue to work provided we stick with the protocols that have been established and negotiated with Gavin Newsom's office, and you're following the protocols as established by your local county Department of Health.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. So someone asked, since we have to work without protection, shouldn't we get vaccinated? Shouldn't we essentially move up the list? And how do we make this happen? I don't have the answer to that question. If anyone who's hopped on does, Paul?
The order in which people are getting vaccinated is established by the state and to a lesser degree by the counties, and they're not considering any particular industry or type of worker as yet. So far it's been based on age and whether or not you are working in the healthcare industry. I'm also a reserve with Pasadena Fire Department, and our whole department got vaccinated. So I'm actually waiting on my second one. So it's not about essential workers per se. It's about your status as it relates to that protocol that they've already established. So because you could say the same thing about restaurant workers because they're working too.
But there is going to be lobbying, right, to get people moved up the list, right? And we've got
on an ongoing basis.
Obviously, there's financial workers who, like, if you work in a bank, you are essential because you're helping people get their money, right? But a lot of the big banks are going to try to get their administrators up on the 35th floor, also considered essential because they're a part of the same industry, right? So there's going to be lobbying. I don't really have any information on sort of where SAG-AFTRA members are on the list. Certainly we're not at the front of the line. And of course it's going to depend a lot on age and stuff like that. But yeah, if you believe that we should be closer to the head of the line, then that's something to talk to your representatives about. Right. And it'll take a sort of concerted lobbying effort. I know it feels like it'd be a bad look to have Hollywood stars getting vaccinated before some other people. But of course, not all SAG-AFTRA members are Hollywood stars. But yeah, it's complicated. It's a fair question, but it's a complicated answer. Okay, I'm gonna go to Shay Scullin right now. Shay, are you still there? Yes, Shay. Oh, did you do it? You're so good, Kevin. Shay, good to see you. Shay, you shot a commercial recently, is that right?
I did, just a few weeks ago.
Can you take us through and briefly, if you can,
yes.
The process of it? So after you were cast, right? I want to know about the safety protocols that you encountered. And the testing, how often you were tested, and ultimately I want to know how safe you felt.
Water. So they sent us a list of 2 locations that we could be tested, and that was for the cast and everyone involved in the crew. So in each and every person. And so I picked a location, went to it, and waited kind of a long time, since it was also a testing location for other industries.
Okay.
So it was a while, but it clipped along, and it was the nasal swab. And then we got our results within a couple days, went to do wardrobe, and did our fittings, and each cast member had their own fittings. Then after that, a few days later, they
When
sent
you,
us.
sorry,
sorry?
sorry. When you said each cast member had your own fitting, do you mean do you mean you never crossed paths with them in the same building at the same time, or just that you were in separate areas of the same building?
We ended up in the same room, but we were separated by time,
Okay.
so that we never. His time was a certain time, and then he left, and then I went in, and then I left, and then the next cast member came in. So they separated us, and there was a distance between us, even though we had all tested negative for COVID. They tried to have a buffer between each of us, since each of us needed to have wardrobe times.
Yeah.
And they just wanted the room cleared and desanitized or sanitized or whatever it is, you know the word, so that it was that we go in feeling that the room was clean and prepped between each of us. And then
Hey, Shay, I'm really
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. Can I bump you for a second, because
Absolutely.
our ER doctor had an overnight and
Bigger name.
just
Bigger
needs-
name. Yes, I'll be here.
Okay, great. I'm going to come
Yeah.
back to you. So Ross, Kevin, if we could put Ross L in as a co-host. I've just got a couple questions for Ross. Let's see. Ross, you're the co-host. If you could start your video, unless you're not camera ready, Ross. There you are. Oh, you don't look the least bit exhausted, Ross. Thank you so much for being here, Ross. So I've got a couple questions for you, and I'm not certain that you'll be able to answer this, but someone asked, what's your opinion on the Abbott ID rapid molecular test, and why isn't it called a rapid PCR? I have to be perfectly honest, I don't understand any of the words that I just said. Do you, and what is your opinion on that?
I'm not familiar with that specific test. Is that a PCR test? What type of test is that?
Yeah, so where'd that go, Kevin?
It's at the bottom, sorry.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So yeah, so the it's called a rapid molecular test as opposed to a rapid PCR. Have you heard of this molecular test at all, and any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's lots of different tests out there. Many of them have been kind of rushed through. And when we look at testing, we think about sensitivity and specificity. So sensitivity is the ability to detect a positive result, and specificity is when a positive result is actually accurate. And so the PCR test is the gold standard right now, which is very sensitive. So if you have a positive test, it's likely positive. And if you are positive, it is likely positive as well. So it's both sensitive and specific. I believe the PCR tests are about 95% sensitive. A lot of the other testing, the antibody testing, is not nearly as sensitive. So you can get many false negative tests. So you might have a negative test, but you actually have COVID.
So these PCR tests, for there's people who've never been tested before. So can you talk to me about what a PCR, and forgive me for those who have, but I feel like this is important. What is a PCR test?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact science behind how it works, but it's a polymerase chain reaction test.
But I'm saying, is a PCR a swab? Is it is it in the mouth? Is it a blood? How does that work?
So it's a nasal swab, and so you get a swab, and both sides of your nose. They basically shove it in up to your brain. It hurts pretty bad. And then that gets sent for testing. Where I work, we have a rapid PCR. We can get a result in about 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. And so obviously the fact that y'all use it, you feel very good about its sensitivity and its specificity.
That's correct. But there's definitely patients I see that have a negative test, but I'm certain they have COVID. And I treat them as if they do have COVID, and likely the next day when we test them again, they'll be positive. So we'll still see false negatives, but the PCR test is a lot better test compared to many of the other ones out there.
Is every nasal swab test a PCR test? And is every PCR test a nasal swab test?
That's a good question. I believe all of the PCR tests are nasal swab tests. I believe there are tests that are nasal swabs that are not PCR tests as well.
Okay. And so these tests in the mouth, and hi, Paul. I'm so glad you're still here. Ross, in case you didn't catch it, Paul is a COVID compliance officer on sets. So he's testing people all day long and making sure that people aren't making out on set when they shouldn't be. So do you have any feelings, Ross, on the specificity and sensitivity of blood tests, of mouth tests as compared to PCRs?
Yeah, many of them are very poor. We've used them in our hospital, and we've abandoned everything other than the PCR testing at this point.
Wow.
So many of the antibody tests and the other tests are just so insensitive. They have very limited utility at all.
Okay.
So there are a lot of tests out there, and many are very inaccurate and don't provide good data.
Okay.
So you can be falsely reassured, or you might have a false positive and then think you have it and you don't. So the PCR tests are the best, and that's the only test we're using right now in the hospital.
Yeah. And is that, Paul, is that all we're using on sets these days?
Well, just a couple of just additions to what Ross said, a little bit of clarification. PCR test, the test and the method of collection are two different things. PCRs can be either nasal or oral pharyngeal swab tests. They are both approved in most cases by the FDA. If you look on the website, you can actually see where they approve. Most PCR tests the sample collection can be either nasal or oral. And just something about the tests themselves, there is something relatively new, as you were saying, that what's called the rapid PCR test, which is also kind of known as a PCR in a box. It's where it's actually, or a laboratory in a box. Supposedly the laboratory literally is mobile. Not very many people are using it. There's some question about how accurate that one is. But so all the tests that we do for my company are the PCR laboratory process tests. They could also be considered rapid. That's where the problem of the terminology comes in, because the testing at the laboratory takes 3 hours. So that could be considered rapid. The problem is just the logistics of both getting the sample into the laboratory, being tested, and then getting notified of your results can take up to 24 hours. Our tests at Screen Test LA are all same day. We get the results back that evening for everything that was submitted that day. The other two types of tests are the antigen test and the antibody test. Neither one of those have been approved by the FDA for either asymptomatic people or for screening. They're not allowed to be used in the settings that we are using. As Ross said, they are used for different purposes in a hospital. They can use the antigen test because the antigen test doesn't test for virus. It tests for the protein coding of the virus, and it is not as accurate, but it has a value in a hospital, a clinical setting. It cannot be used in the field at all. It's not approved for that. And that is also a nasal or an oral swab. But instead of it going to a laboratory in a vial, it goes onto a cassette similar to a pregnancy test, and then it is evaluated right there in 15 minutes. That's the antigen test, but they're not nearly as accurate. They're known to have many false negatives, and some false positives. And as we've said,
are these the curative tests that I've been hearing about that have been recently found to be less?
Yeah. As I recall, I can't remember specifically because I think curative is a brand name, so I can't say for sure about that. But if it's a laboratory PCR test, then it is, as Russ said, the gold standard. The other type, which is the antibody test, which is also a cassette, but that's a blood test. That tests for antibodies. It doesn't tell you anything about whether or not you might be currently infected. It tells you whether or not at some point in the past you might have been exposed, you might have gotten sick, you might be better now. And in fact, we have been offered by our lab a new version of the antibody test that will be valuable going forward for testing people that have been vaccinated to see if they are actually generating antibodies that would then mean that they should be immune at that point, which also says nothing about whether or not they can either contract or transmit the virus, even if they never show symptoms or getting infected. That is, at this point, Ross can verify, but as we understand it, that is still an open question.
So Ross, I don't have any more medical questions for you specifically. I am so grateful for you, to you for popping in and seeing if anyone had any questions for you. Please go get some rest, and thank you. I'm not gonna cry. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. You're a goddamn hero. So thank you. We all really, really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to help, and you guys stay safe.
All right, man. Have a good night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay. So Paul, if you could jump back on.
Sure.
Yeah, Paul, quick question. Someone said that according to SAG-AFTRA Safeway Forward and the PGA, Abbott ID Now is the test that's mentioned. Now, the Safeway Forward was distributed in the summer, so I suspect that could have changed by now. And also, I don't have the Safeway Forward document in front of me, so that may be incorrect. So not to say that this person is incorrect, but it just could be. I don't want anyone to take that as gospel, just because I can't confirm it right now. But Paul,
I believe that's correct.
Okay, fantastic. Paul, what types of PCR tests are being okayed by the union right now? Someone wants to know what types of PCR tests. Now, that might be a bit of a complicated question or a vague question, because as you said, there's many labs that are doing this. So,
well, the short answer is all of them. If it's a PCR test, and that means a laboratory base, this new on-site rapid laboratory in a box test, I'm not sure who has approved it. I am on a number of the COVID compliance forums, and I keep hearing rumors about rapid PCR tests, and nobody can really define what they are. And so there's some question about that. Personally, I wouldn't use them until it becomes ubiquitous. So any more than you want to buy the new model of a TV for the first time it comes out either. Right. You want it to establish something.
So someone said, when I show up to set, how do I know if the PCR test is a good PCR test? And what your response is that if it's PCR, you're good.
Basically, yes. In that, as I say, a laboratory processed PCR test, and you can tell because they're not going to get results in 15 minutes. They're going to get results later that day or tomorrow. That's actually the key to knowing what kind of PCR test you're getting. If it is that, they are our laboratory is very tightly regulated by the FDA. They cannot, screw around. They've all been approved by the FDA under the emergency use authorization. And therefore you can depend that they're all basically the same. There isn't a great deal of difference. They develop their own tests for their own reasons in terms of just putting together. All our tests, our swab kits come from the laboratory. We get them from them. We go out to the field. We do concierge testing. We do on-site group testing. And then we collect all the samples. We take them back to the lab. They're back at the lab in an hour or two after we get done with our testing session. And later that day, we have the results. That's how you know it's a laboratory process test, because your swab goes in a little vial with your name on it. You filled out a piece of paper with the laboratory's name on it. You know that when you sign it, because that's a requirement under law, because you have to approve that they are going to test you. You've given them your email address that you're going to get your results. All of that should be true. If it's not, there is some question as to what kind of test they're using. Early on, I was on a show, not as CCO, where they used an antibody test, a blood test, and one, we're charging the same amount, which is ridiculous because they're like $5. And they were giving 15-minute results. That is not a PCR test. Cannot be. It's not possible. PCR is a molecular RNA, DNA chain test that has it's a complicated procedure as to how that sample is processed. It's not something you can really do easily. It takes a lot of equipment, millions of dollars worth of equipment.
Right. Okay.
Because they have to grow the virus by 1 million times in order for it to be detectable. That's
Right.
part of the process. So
awesome.
So all the PCR, if it's a laboratory PCR test, they're basically all the same. They're all reliable.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, I want to make one clarification. There was one laboratory recently, it was in the news last week, that may have been decertified because there was some false negatives. But that's actually, knowing that is a good thing, because the FDA keeps on top of that. They had some internal problem at the lab that was causing them to have a higher than normal false rate. But they caught it, and they basically decertified that test. So they can't afford to get on the bad side of the FDA.
Okay. Great. Stacy Travis, who I just trust implicitly, asked me to share this with everyone in the Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube, I can't share it with you, but this is a tools and resources for producers and employers during COVID-19. So this is, I gonna be totally frank with y'all, I haven't even looked at what that is yet. But Stacy said you should share this with people, and I have. So click on that. Stacy, let me know in the chat if they're watching on YouTube and not on Zoom and they can't see this chat box. What should they? Oh, it says it has lots of info about tests. What should they Google or look up to if they're watching this on YouTube and can't see the link that's on Zoom? While I'm getting to that, Shay, if you could turn yourself back on. Ooh. Before you continue telling us about your experience on a commercial set, I do have one quick answer to a question. Does anyone know how to apply for the mixed income, the extra $100 a week that you get with unemployment? Yes, I've shared that a couple times. I have shared it again in the chat. Go to mixedincome.org, and no matter where you are in the country, it will give you information on how to apply for that, see if you're eligible. It's actually a very simple, great website that I poked around on. So Stacy says if you want that information about tests, go under resource tools, productions during COVID. Oh, that's troubling. Someone said that they couldn't find on mixedincome.org how to figure out how to apply. Let me give you another link. And forgive me, if this doesn't get you what you need, I apologize. And if anyone has, is Giselle still here?
She is not.
Giselle jumped. Okay. So Mindy, I just dropped in the chat another link to the EDD website having to do specifically with entertainment employees. If that and mixedincome.org don't do it for you, will you hit me up on Instagram and just send me a DM? One of our other You Are the Unions we did, or not, it wasn't a You Are the Union, but it was sort of the same sort of group of people, did a thing specifically about EDD. And people came away from that really feeling like they understood it a lot better. So hit me up on Instagram and I will get you that video, and hopefully that will talk you through it. I am very clueless about EDD, but I know that we've got other people who are not. Anyway,
and I'm thankful for everything that Stacy has done in the realm of EDD.
Stacy Travis, if y'all don't know, has been part of our team lobbying Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi, really instrumental in getting us that extra $100. Our team, our SAG-AFTRA team, wrote the mixed income portion of the stimulus bill. So people across the country, and obviously Gabrielle, our president, conversations with Nancy Pelosi about how important that is. But what's great is this was put in by Gabrielle and Stacy and our incredible staff. This was put in to help us, the SAG-AFTRA members, but it has benefited millions and millions of other Americans, which is so cool, and I'm just so grateful for. So thank you, Gabby, thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Shay, for reminding me to shout them out. Anyway, Shay, forgive the interruption. You were telling us that you got a test. You got one test, and then a couple days later, you went for your fitting. In your fitting, you didn't encounter any other actors.
Well, we ended up, I think, probably passing in the hall, but we weren't meshed together. The person that I happened to see happened to be the other actor. So no, we weren't placed in proximity.
So talk to me about the time frame here. What day did you get tested? Was it Thursday or whatever?
Got tested on a Monday and then did wardrobe on Thursday.
Okay. And when did you start shooting?
The next week I got tested on Tuesday, and shot on Friday.
Okay. So each time you were called into work, you were tested about 3 days ahead of time.
Yes.
Okay. And did you shoot one day on the commercial?
Yes.
Okay. Did they talk to you at all about not partying after you got tested?
Yeah. Don't even shop. I mean, it was a once you book this, it was pretty much get tested, and we'd really strongly want you to don't do anything, don't shop, don't leave your home. Okay. And they were really serious that this is a job. So for 2 weeks I didn't shop, I didn't do anything. I did COVID tests, wardrobe, home. The next week COVID test, and shot.
And you shot for 1 day, you say?
Yes.
And tell me about that day. Tell me about showing up. And
showed up first thing in the morning really early, and I wore 3 masks because I'm excessive, but I wear 3 masks, one for me, one for the other person who's not wearing a mask, and then the one on top just for protection, whatever. And I got there, and so I waited in the line of people waiting to check in, and then someone went up to me and said, wait, your principal, I need you up here. Come on, mind if he line jumps and move me up? And they took my temperature right away, signed me in, and moved me. Then they said, oh, those masks that you're wearing aren't N95. We're an N95 set. So we, even though I had 3 on, they said, you can go ahead and put those in your bag. You need to wear these, and swap me out. And then everybody on the set had N95 masks and face shields. And then we got in a van. Everyone had to sit completely far apart. So,
How many people were on that van?
well, there was the driver, and then me in the middle, and someone all the way in the back. And then they sent that one, and then another one showed up, and there was the driver, someone else in the middle, someone in the far back, and then they sent another shuttle. So they'd only allow 2 people as long as they were 6 feet apart.
And how long were you in that van?
Three to 5 minutes,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay. Did that feel unsafe to you?
No.
Okay.
I mean, the protocols that they were taking were so complete that, and he rolled down the window to make sure that, and there was airflow constantly. So I didn't feel worried.
When you started shooting, was there a lot of background on the job?
No, there was just the other actor and I at that point. And there was one moment that I didn't have a mask. The other person didn't have a mask for the shoot, and I had a major wardrobe malfunction, huge wardrobe malfunction. So cleared camera and the wardrobe, and so as soon as they said cut, I expressed into the microphone that I had a wardrobe malfunction that was fairly huge. So I went back to my mark.
Shay, just say it. You shit your pants.
No, the wardrobe actually fell off in the back.
Okay. Wow.
So
Okay.
then the wardrobe people came over, and then the guy looked and went, "Oh, this is huge. This will take more than a minute." And then I had the wardrobe woman got behind the robe and started sewing me back in. The wardrobe man was safety pinning me on the side, and another woman was sewing me in on this side. So I had I just had my arms out, and 3 people were sewing on 2 sides and one pinning me on this side. So
masks and shields, or just
they had masks and shields.
Okay.
And I felt absolutely completely safe.
Okay.
So and I had a mask and shield at that point actually too. So
okay.
I do have to say I had mask and a face shield while they were, Cinderella-ing me at that point, I guess, for lack of a better word. Because they they were doing it really, really quickly, but he was also saying, this is a build on, we're building building this wardrobe. So then they rebuilt the wardrobe and bit the thread and turned me around. We're like, okay. And then I was back at it. And
how long was your shoot day?
That was I got up at 3:30. I showed up at 6:30 and was wrapped by 10:45.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
I know. We were the last 2 commercials I've been broke by noon. So this one was 10:45. I was wrapped.
Wow.
So
wow,
we did it. And
that's wild. Well, I'm so happy for you, Shay. I'm so glad that you booked something. I'm glad that you felt safe. I'm glad that that you seem healthy.
Yes. Have not obtained COVID. And there was one quick thing I'll say is that that one of the people, and I don't know if it was COVID compliance or what her exact role was at that moment, but if I was not wearing a mask for more than 30 seconds and we were not rolling, she'd come up and go, okay, you need to put this on. And then the AD was going, okay, rolling, speed. And I would say, I appreciate you. I've got it. I've got to do this. So I'm gonna, but I see you. I gotcha. I appreciate you. I'm gonna just do this. And she couldn't hear them because she was telling me at the time to put a mask on at the same time that I'm on my mark, getting ready to go. So there's so much going on at that moment. But it because everyone has their best interest and your best interest and everything in mind, that everyone was completely protected. And I never for 1 second felt like,
That's
that
great.
I
That's
was
awesome.
in harm's way.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Shay. Thank you. Jason, I'd love to go to you in a moment. So Kevin, if you could get Jason ready to come into the room. I would just love to hear from Jason, who's working on Station 19, which I think is taking some pretty intense safety measures. But first, I do want to answer 2 quick questions, or read some statements that have come through the chat. Someone said, I think it's important to speak to what someone should do when COVID compliance is lacking. Well, we went over that really early on in the show. Is that what this is? Where talk to the COVID compliance officer, right? And if the COVID compliance officer isn't taking it seriously, talk to the union, right? Your COVID compliance officer should be taking it seriously, but hey, crazy stuff can happen. This person is saying, I was on a set in August that was horrible. I contacted local staff. I'm in a local market outside of LA. And within 30 minutes, the producers had been contacted. The director was pulled from set. A conversation was had, and it was all turned around. That is a fantastic story of SAG-AFTRA staff coming through and making sure that people are safe. As this person says, you can't be afraid to speak up. The life you are saving could be your own. Could not agree more. And thank you so much for sharing that. Someone else said, I'm working Friday. They made me they set a PCR test via saliva in a tube. And I knew the next morning. Is that a legit PCR test? As far as I know, yes. Paul, yes. Yes. Okay, great. Thank you, Paul.
Our lab just got these for us. They're new. It's a different version of the same thing. I don't know if there's anything different at their end, but it's a regular PCR test, but it's a saliva test instead of a nasal swab or an oral swab test. But it's just as reliable because it's processed the same way. I had forgotten to mention it. We don't generally use them except when we have to send tests out to somebody to basically do a self-administered test, then they send it directly to the lab, like because we're testing somebody who lives out of town and is going to be coming in. Because it doesn't require a healthcare provider to actually administer the swab as it does with the other types. So yes, the saliva-based PCR laboratory process tests are just as reliable. They're just new.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Jason, you ready to talk to me for a second?
Sure.
Fantastic, buddy. Hey, nice to see you.
What's up?
So you're a regular on 19, right?
Fortunately, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, for now, you never know what'll happen next season.
People die.
Why did I say that?
Characters die all the time.
Evil. Can you talk to us about your experience on that show, which is one of the more expensive shows, one of the sort of larger ongoing series in LA? Your experience with the safety protocols on that set. What's it like on that show?
I mean, it's pretty fantastic. The only place I feel safer is at home. We're tested 3 times a week. ABC, Disney, I think it's Disney-wide, 3-ply masks that they give, not K95 or N95. We had N95s and then we had K90, and we gave those away. We had N95 left over from the end of last season, which I was like, they're short an N95 mask. We should give them to first responders. So we donated all of our N95 masks to first responders in Southern California. And then we got K95s, but then Disney wanted these 3-ply masks, which work great and look cool too. People have decorated them as they see fit to try and keep it going. And so, I mean, we're getting tested 3 times a week. Just as an example, coming back from the holidays, we were supposed to be, they take it very seriously because not only I'm on the SAG-AFTRA National Board, but then one of our executive producers, our producing director is Paris Barkley, who is a former president of the DGA. And he's knee deep in their protocols conversations as well. So our sets, and then Gray's, we've got a lot of doctors. We've got a lot of doctors and a lot of folks in the mix. So Our hallways are directional. You literally, they're one-way directional, and the only time that changes is when any actors are coming to set. Any of the they'll actually let you walk the wrong way, but they're actually walking you like you're Secret Service. They're actually talking. They're like actually calling ahead. So we have a lot of extra PAs to get cast, co-stars, guest stars, series regulars from point A to point B, to get crew to stop moving through the hallways so that we can go the wrong way down the hallways. That, it's just things like that. No one is, we have zone A and zone B. And if anybody's looked at the protocol, zone A is anybody who comes in contact with the cast who might be maskless at any given point in time.
Right.
Zone B,
zone A, the actors are in zone A, right?
Yeah, the actors are like the nucleus of zone A, and
right.
then everyone who comes in close proximity to the actors. So
while they're maskless, right? Because directors in zone A.
Yes.
Okay.
Here's the example. Zone A is getting tested 3 times a week. Zone B is getting tested once a week. I'm having a conversation with my fellow actor, and we're just talking after we finish rehearsing the scene, and we were doing a turnaround. And one of the PAs walked up and said, "No, there are people who need to get in here who can't get on set yet until you leave. So get out." And we have big old signs out front that say Zone A. And as soon as we get off, now it's Zone B. And anybody who's in Zone B getting tested once a week can now come on set.
So it's sort of like when you're at like a skating rink, and it'll have a sign that'll say like all skate, and then like, ladies only. Like so,
ladies only. Right.
So it's that kind of like Zone A is in there right now, and now Zone B is in there right now. Yeah.
Exactly. It's only Zone B is allowed in there with the members of Zone A that are always there. Camera operators and that sort of thing. But the cast is out. So that's really, basically it turns into Zone A when the cast comes on, and that's co-stars, guest stars, series regulars, because, we're handling props. We occasionally have to be maskless. Also, they take, like my wardrobe comes in a bag that says this, sanitized bag, I have a bin that says, for all of the clothes that you to drop in there to get rid of, so that wardrobe that's in Zone B doesn't necessarily have to touch my clothes ever, that sort of thing. So it's all the way up and down the food chain. When the directors, when they yell cut, originally the rule was, and this is the COVID compliance, and this is how shows work it into itself. When we would yell cut, we had to mask up. All the actors had to mask up no matter what. But then at a certain point in time, we realized there was a lot of times where the director would yell cut. That really, just a quick adjustment that the DP needs to make, or yelling out an actor adjustment. It's not a big deal. It's literally all of 10, 15 seconds. So rather than taking the 2 minutes it takes to bring the mask in, put the mask on, hands get sprayed with sanitizer, and then take them off again, same process in reverse. I just said, when we cut, ask all department heads if anybody needs to go in. If nobody needs to come in, then beauty of digital, just keep it rolling and we'll go again. But it's about working those things in so that if nobody's coming into the actor's space, I was like, we're actually getting exposed more often by having people come in to bring us masks and do the mask thing again and again than if you just took the 10 seconds to make the call. But the point is, you want to start with the most serious rules and then lower it down from there to just enough to, that you can work it in for those 10, 15-second breaks.
When did you go back to work on the show after March?
We were lucky. We wrapped, literally we had our wrap party I believe 3 days before Los Angeles shut down.
Wow.
And then Grey's Anatomy, because our shows bounce, we share a lot of cast. I go back and forth between the two. Grey's Anatomy still had another 3 or 4 episodes to shoot, and they had to shut down. They shut down in the middle of a scene. They just, and they've since gone back and used footage that they shot in episodes that aired this season. We went back to work late August. Normally we would go back mid to late July. We went back late August, early September this time. And normally we do 8 to 10 day shoots. We usually do 2 days of overlaps. The last 2 days of episode 1 will overlap with the first 2 days of episode 2. and it'll spread over the course of 10 days, even though guest stars have to be shot out within an 8-day period. The crazy part was, now, nope, we're doing 8-day shoots, trying to do 10-hour day shoots, trying to do 10-hour days instead of 12. So also they turned that into lunches that are floating lunches, lunches out and you go get it when you can, because you don't want 150 people all going out to eat at the exact same time. So as it is, you want to be dismissing people by department, that sort of thing. So it, the result was a few times that actors, where we were like, "Have you eaten? Are we?" It's late. It's late. I got a meal penalty coming because it's right. Late in the day, and that's happened a few times. But that all got better, and it was just
between late August and now, how many weeks have you taken off of the show?
We've shot nonstop. Except for regular holidays, we haven't had to shut down yet. We've had knock wood. We've had, I know of 2 positive test results that came back. And every time a positive test result comes back, it's known, although nobody's identified because privacy is important. And great care is taken to find out who it is and contact tracing, that sort of thing. And we haven't had to shut down because of the positive tests and where they were located. That said, we took the 2 weeks for what was supposed to be the holidays. And then we were supposed to be coming back on the 6th. And our show voluntarily pushed to the 11th of January in order to make sure that we gave room for whatever might be happening with people getting their party on New Year's. And then I think it's Disney-wide, the word came down, we're going to push to the 18th. And I think it's better than 50% chance that we'll be back on Monday shooting. But, there is distinctly a chance that we push again. And SAG-AFTRA has, got no small amount of, sway in that with the push that they're making to, let's make sure we pay attention to what we're doing. So we're all just waiting to make certain that we're going back on Monday.
Let me ask you, if I were on your set in late August and in the beginning of December, how different would the precautions and protocols and all of that feel? Do you feel like there was it got tighter, it got smarter? Is there any change?
Yeah. Like I said, it got smarter. Like I was saying, we were taking precautions so stringently that we were, how do I put this? That we were actually killing ourselves in the moments where we didn't need to. And we said, let's pay attention to what needs to happen. Like what needs to happen is that if anybody's coming near the actors, they need to be wearing a face mask and a shield if you come anywhere near the actors while they're not masked. And when do the actors need to mask up? Those sort of things we worked through to make sure that everybody felt safe and we were still following the protocols 100%. Things have gotten easier. Easier is the wrong word. We've gotten more used to how these protocols work. And that every couple of 3 weeks, you start to feel people starting to get a little lax again. And we've been very good about having another meeting. We have safety meetings every few days to just sort of like make sure everybody's on the same page. And we'll routinely every 2-3 weeks give praise to the COVID compliance officers. Literally we call them the COPO. Give the COPO some love and remind everybody, if they're not here and we're not doing all this, we don't work. And that's how that goes. So be thankful for your blessings. And so just to get everybody back on point, reset everybody's, don't slack button. So that's the part that's kept it up. Because I think on every set, it's a serious thing. It's a few weeks in. We got to make it a serious again. And you got to bounce it back up and goose it back into a place where everybody takes it very seriously again. Yeah. And it's also been interesting because we originally, and it's still kind of the case, we were told, really make sure you come to set 100%, 150% prepared because we're doing shorter days, it's going to be fewer takes. It's going to be less coverage. It's going to be pop, pop, pop. They're like, so if you haven't shot in daytime, guess what? It's going to feel a little closer to that. We're going to be making it happen. And that's, so that's loosened a little bit. They've realized that it didn't need to be so. It wasn't completely either or. So you get a little bit more of a few more opportunities, a few more takes than we were at the beginning of the season. But it's also been interesting because our directors, most of the directors that we've had, sign on for 2 episodes at a time, and they've been leapfrogging each other. I think part of that so that once you're in the bubble, once you're in our pod, we got you, and we know you're good. And to keep that running, because that way that they start pre-production, then they shoot, and they're in post-production and doing pre-production on the next one. So they've never stopped testing with us, and that's really convenient.
Nice. That's great, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. One last question from a viewer. Is that what? I don't know what this is. Are the masks that you wear during your scenes the same ones that you wear between takes?
No, actually, funny enough, although they are the same brand of masks, so they are qualified to be the mask that we want it to be. So it's funny because they actually had some cast-off masks that the logo was not the size that they wanted originally. It was like a little too big, and so they gave that to a bunch of us as here's some extra masks, and it's and they just you constantly need to keep having and providing more and more masks because I'm in the barber chair. And zit, and my mask just limps off, and then need a new mask. So it's constantly going on. So, but yeah, the masks that we have on set are not, even though they're exactly the same.
That's funny. Okay. Well, Jason, thank you so much for sharing all that, and thank you for all the work you're doing on the national board. I don't know where you find the time, so thank you.
No, but thank everybody here for actually paying attention and spread the word that sets are safe and it feels safe. And most importantly, there was a point at which some people in the populace were starting to cry foul. Why do the actors get to work, but I don't? And I think that's, completely and utterly valid point that they make. But I also think that we had the benefit of having employers that have incredibly deep pockets. Most, the average bookstore can't afford to pay, we're paying close to $1 million per episode to come back. There are shows that got canceled because the networks or studios were not willing for that particular show to pay the money it would take to bring them back. So it's a blessing that doesn't go all the way across the board, and work has definitely been lessened. So I say to those people, we're just blessed that we've got the people who are willing and able to provide the protocols and PPE necessary, safety testing 3 times a week for us to come back. It's not that we're special, it's that there's deep pockets involved in the process. And if you had that, you could too, but maybe if everybody wore a mask, we could get closer to that.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. Yeah. Watching my friends' Instagrams from New Zealand, and I'm like, all right, yeah, go have a party since you can.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thank you again, Jason. I really, really appreciate you coming on. Joy Benedict said, just so you know, and this is to Jason's point, not only are actors allowed to work because we have employers with deep pockets, but because we have a union that is fighting for very stringent safety protocols. So to that point, SAG-AFTRA got the CBS broadcast building COVID testing starting in August. The entire news department, whether they're SAG-AFTRA or not, gets tested every single week. The union pushed for that, right? So yes, thank you so much to the union. I have one more thing. Mindy, Stacey Travis wanted me to let you know that you have to call EDD in California to apply to get your 1099 money. And then you have to have more than $5,000 in 1099 from 2019. I hope that makes sense to you. If it doesn't, you've got my Insta. It's Adamir Talai. Great timing, because I have no more questions here. Just some people saying thank you for our time, and y'all, thank you. This has been awesome. I can't thank all of our guests. Is this a show? I don't know what this is. We just thought, let's get on a Zoom and let's talk to people and get people the information they need. So I don't know what this is, but Thank you to our guests, Paul Emmons, our COVID compliance officer. Thank you, Paul. We've got to the Val and, oh God, my brain is mush. I forget the other agent who was on here, and I apologize. For all the guys sharing their experiences on set. Thank you, Katie Von Till. Thank you, Giselle. Thank you, Kevin Ashworth, for monitoring the chat and getting me all the questions and stuff like that. Thank you for Ellen for sort of putting this all together with me and getting all these smart people to be on.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to say hello to Shay, my friend, and to Ellen as well. Hello. And thanks for the opportunity.
Hey, man. Thank you. Thank you. All right, folks. That's all we got. Thank you. If y'all have any other questions, I'm always answering questions like this on my Insta. So hit me up. And maybe we'll do this again if y'all think. Let me know. Should we do this again? All right. I don't know how to end this. What am I saying? Hey, do me a favor. Tell your friends that you did this, that you saw this, and that it was good. Like I said, you are the union, right? Let your friends know on social that, hey, I did this You Are the Union Zoom and I got a lot of great information. I think it's important for people to know that there are good people sharing good information, like all of the people that were on this Zoom with us, just generously giving of their time. I think it's important, world is so gross. It's good to know that there's good people doing good stuff. Oh my God, someone said my background looks like COVID, and that's true, and I'll never be able to unsee it. God damn it.